Horror books can be typically pretty scary to begin with, especially if you're reading them all by your lonesome. The one thing with your average Stephen King book though is that even though it's very scary, you can rest assured that it isn't actually haunted. The books that we're going to be looking at today though, you can't say the same thing. What is good my friends, my name is Nicholas Playlog and I'm your host in today's video where we're going to be looking at the top 5 haunted books you need to pray before reading part 3. Let's get into it. Number 5 on this list is the Sworn Book of Honorius. This is an ancient medieval grimoire that was very influential and was apparently written by Honorius of Thebes. I say that word apparently because it's currently unknown whether Honorius of Thebes was actually a real person or a complete myth. If he was real, then he's said to have a deep connection with religion, magic, and the devil. This book, the Sworn Book of Honorius, is said to be the oldest medieval grimoire to date, with some people estimating that it was written back in the 1300s. Even though Honorius of Thebes was said to have written this book, it's said to be a collection of many magicians who attempted to condense the knowledge that they had into 93 chapters. The book covers a wide array of magical topics. This includes having the ability to travel to purgatory or to potentially save someone from purgatory or even send them there in the first place. It shows people the rituals necessary to summon a demon and bring them into our real physical world. Then once that demon is there, the book goes on to describe how we can command a demon to do our bidding. It shows people how to send someone to hell or to heaven if that person chooses. It even goes in depth about treasure hunting and the proper methods to finding treasure. This book was supposed to act as a one-stop shop on how to be a full magician. A big warning though, and why you need to pray before reading, is actually written in the book. Let him who would work in a magical art beware that he not be in deadly sin, for if he be, he shall be mad ever after. For the soul by its nature desires to see God in whom it delights, but the impediment of sin frustrates its desire and it cannot see God. He who would work in magical art must be willing in his work and utterly cleansed from all filthiness, for the more he suffers, the more he shall obtain. Basically, if you intend to use this book, then you can expect your soul to go through some serious suffering. Number 4 on this list is the Dragon Rouge. The Dragon Rouge is an updated version of one of the most haunted texts in history, the Grand Grimoire. Keegan actually covered the Grand Grimoire in one of his previous parts of this series, so I highly recommend you go check out one of those videos if you haven't already. But the Cole's notes are that the Grand Grimoire was a text that described how to make a deal with the devil. It showed the reader how to summon Lucifer and then how to make a pact with him once he is summoned. The Dragon Rouge is a version of this Grand Grimoire that goes further into detail on several demons and how one should summon them. What's interesting about this text is that it inspired the name for a cult group in the 90s called the Dragon Rouge. This cult was founded by Thomas Carlson, a Swedish man, in 1989. Thomas claimed that he had visions growing up as a child and believed to be connected to spirits and God somehow. This cult is based in the left-hand path of magic, which for those who don't know, is considered to be the dark magic and associated with the workings of the devil. Apparently, the Dragon Rouge text is one that is worshipped and used quite often during the proceedings of this cult. If you wanted to, you could actually visit the Dragon Rouge's website and volunteer to join their cult, but based on the writings of the book that they worship, I personally wouldn't recommend it.
Coming in our 3rd spot, we have the Book of Sacred Magic. Back in the 15th century, a mage named Abramelin decided to gift his son with a book filled with mythical curses. I doubt it was on his son's wish list, but hey, it's the thought that counts, right? Anyways, in the 1900s, the book was translated to English, and that's when people realized it was probably cursed. Why? Well, throughout the book, it talked about rituals on how to control your demons. Abra believed that every person had their own demon, not just a metaphorical one, but a literal one. This book taught you on how to control your demon. It also talked about how to perform other supernatural acts. In the end, it was believed that whoever owns a copy will be haunted by spirits, and bad luck will befall on them. In fact, a number of people have reported bad luck and hauntings after reading this book. So it seriously isn't worth it. Like, I'm not getting cursed. No thank you. Coming in at number 2, we have the Book of Soya, otherwise known as the book that kills. So I suggest you don't put it on your reading list. Basically, this book was created in the 16th century and is a Latin essay all about demonology. To this day, we still don't know who wrote it. But what we do know is that John Dee, who worked as an advisor for Elizabeth I, got the book in 1580. He spent the rest of his life trying to decipher the whole thing. He quickly realized that this book was no good. It talked about how to conjure demons and had a list of spells and stuff like that. Rumor has it that one section of the book he could not decipher at all. It was a page with tables filled with random Latin letters. But he was determined to decipher it. So him and his pal, who was an occultist and medium, apparently summoned the archangel Uriel. The angel apparently spoke through his friend and said that this book was made when Adam entered paradise. And also, apparently only Archangel Michael is the only one who can decipher the full book. The angel also warned them that the book was cursed, and anyone who deciphers the meaning of the coded tables would die 2.5 years later. Well, in the end, this book drove John to madness, and he died. After his death, the book was lost for the longest time, until 1994. That's when not one, but 2 copies were found. Crazy. But let me know in the comments below, if you had the opportunity, would you risk your life deciphering this book? I'm a little curious to see what it's about, but also I don't want to die, so maybe not. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is this massive 310-page book said to harness evil and negative energy. It was discovered in 1648 when a Swedish army looted the city of Prague. During this time, they discovered this book, which is considered the largest medieval book in the world. Like I said, it was composed of 310 pages, but it is also 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick, and weighs 165 pounds. In fact, the book did contain 320 pages at one point, but the last 10 pages were cut out and removed. More on this later, stay tuned. So now, there's this really creepy legend surrounding this book. Legend goes that the book was written by a monk, but this monk broke his spiritual vows, and he was sentenced to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. The night before his death, he realized he would not be able to finish his book, so he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that this book was finished by the devil himself. Now, remember those pages that I said were removed? Well, apparently they were removed for a very important reason. Some people believe that those pages told people how to summon the devil. And obviously, if those pages fell into the wrong hands, it would be bad. To make this book even creepier, some pages are filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. One page contains a 19-inch frightening drawing of Satan. And apparently, the book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and tests, like how to perform exorcisms. You know, in case you summon the devil or a demon, then you just want to take it all back again. Starting off this countdown, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire that is said to contain summoning spells for over 72 demons. That's right, this book can help you summon 72 demons. And no one knows who wrote it. What we do know is that this book contains a bunch of compiled texts from the 17th century. Some of these texts tell the reader how to conjure spirits or demons, and then it tells you how to control these entities that you summon. No matter how cool you may think that is, you don't ever want to own this book. This book is apparently so cursed that anyone who keeps a copy of it will die or experience constant bad luck. One person who owned a copy of this book reported the book's pages turning on its own. Another time, the book violently flew across the room at them. They also heard strange whispers coming from the book, and on a number of occasions have seen shadow people. The only way to end this curse is to burn all the pages in the book and then get rid of all the ashes. Seems like a lot of work, so maybe just don't go out seeking copies of it. Although we don't know who wrote the book, legend has it that King Solomon originally wrote it for his son. He then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. But apparently when he was getting prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and one of them got a vision from an angel. The angel told him to hide the book from the unworthy. So he decided to cast a spell on it to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. And that's how the book got its curse. But for some reason, copies of the book can be found on the internet. So if you want to tempt your fate, check it out. But seriously, actually maybe don't. Like, all we need this year are demons taking over the world because some Dumbo tried to summon them. In our 4th spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. Otherwise known as the Gospel of Satan, this book has been named one of the most terrifying occult books in history. So it was apparently written in the 16th century by a man that was possessed by the devil. Yeah, you heard me correctly. The book is filled with instructions on how to summon demons or raise spirits from the dead. Reading this book and following any of the spells is said to be equivalent to selling your soul to the devil, which is why the original book is kept locked away somewhere in the Vatican's secret archives. They don't want anyone messing around with this book. But you can find versions of this book online and for sale, but it won't be the original cursed text. Either way, I'm not risking it. In our third spot today, we have the Voynich manuscript. This manuscript was discovered in an old chest in Rome in 1912 and is believed to have been written sometime in the early 15th century. Now, there is a lot of mystery surrounding this book. For starters, we really don't know who wrote it. Apparently, it was purchased by the Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who believed it had been written by Roger Bacon. But Bacon lived in the 12th century and the paper carbon dated to the 15th. So that doesn't add up. What the heck is going on? Now, the first known owner of the book was an alchemist named George Barish. One day he found the book in his library and he was like, okay, how the heck did it get there? I don't know this book. After him, the book was owned by a number of emperors and officials. Again, no one has ever been able to decipher this 240-page book. Even the best cryptographers and linguists in the world haven't been able to decipher it. Not only that, but the book contains images of plants that have been long extinct. And it also has images of intricate astrological signs. As a result, this book has been deemed the world's most mysterious book and the Everest of historical code breaking. Now, there are a number of theories associated with this book. One is that it was created by aliens, hence why we don't understand the language. It's some alien language. The second theory is that it was created by a demon or the devil himself. In fact, people think that by deciphering this book, it will unleash a curse and kill whoever reads it. This is also why the book has become one of the most feared books of all time. In fact, a number of people who have tried to translate this book have gone on to have years and years of bad luck. Coming in at number 2, we have the Necronomicon. I know what you're thinking. Lindsay, this is a fictional book. Why is this on this list? I'm not about it, okay? And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Untitled Grimoires. Back in 2013, if you want it, go buy it. Starting off this countdown, we have the Orphan's Story. The Orphan's Story is an adventure book about a Spanish teen who heads to the Spanish Empire in search for fortune. Doesn't sound like a scary story at all, right? Well, wrong. This book is apparently very cursed. So it was written in the early 1600s by a monk who broke his sacred vow. His name was Martin de Leon Cardenas. But here's the thing. The book didn't get published until 2018. Why? Because anyone who worked on the book or helped with its publication died under mysterious circumstances. Hence why people started to say that this book was cursed. For example, one editor died in a horrific accident. The other couple of editors died of strange illnesses. Now, you're probably wondering the same thing that I was. How come this seemingly innocent book got cursed? Well, that still remains a mystery. Some believe it was cursed after the author broke his vow. It was cursed as a punishment for his betrayal. Whereas others believe the book is cursed by the devil himself. But it seems as if the curse has been lifted now, so no need to worry. Maybe that's because the author is long gone. Once he died, the curse was lifted. Anyways, in 1965, a woman named Belinda Palacios discovered this book hidden in the archives of the Hispanic Society of America. Everyone warned her about the curse, but she didn't listen. She began working on this book for 2 years. Eventually, in 2018, it finally got published. And it's believed that the curse, again, like I said, is lifted. Either way, I'm not going to tempt my fate by reading it. But let me know in the comments below, are you brave enough to read this cursed book? In our 4th spot today, we have the Great Omar. This book has quite the dark past. So in 1909, a man named Sansgorsky decided to create a much fancier version of the book, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Anyways, he bejeweled it and made the cover look beautiful. It took him 2,500 hours to create. In the end, it had 1,500 precious stones / semi-precious stones, 4,900 leather inlays, and 600 sheets of 22-karat gold leaf. It's honestly a very beautiful book. But the thing is, no one wanted to buy this super expensive book when they could literally get the same book without all that for much cheaper. So all that time and effort was for nothing. no one wanted to buy it. Now, eventually it was put up for auction, but only sold for £450. Ugh. Now, the book was shipped, but it never got to its buyer. Why? Well, the ship it was being transported on was the Titanic, and the book went down with the ship. But wait, get this. Only a few weeks later, the creator of this book mysteriously drowns. Ain't that a freaky coincidence? But that's not all. A second version of this book was created and they called it the Great Omar 2. It was then placed in a bank vault. But the bank was hit by a bomb during the London Blitz of World War II, and this copy was destroyed as well. Then a third copy was created and donated to the British Library, where apparently it is still to this day. But due to its dark past, many believe that this book is cursed and that bad things will happen to whoever owns it. I'd say, like, dang, that was bad luck from the get-go. Like, as soon as he created it, it was just bad luck everywhere. Coming in at number 3, we have Tomino's Hell. Now, this isn't so much a book as it is a poem, but it is so cursed that it deserves a spot on this list, okay? So, Tomino's Hell is the name of a poem written by Seijo Yaso. Legend goes that whoever reads the poem out loud will suffer from misfortune or even death. Consequences range from feeling sick to injuring yourself, and even death. So no one really knows what this poem is about. Some interpret that the poem is about a young boy who descends into the 8 levels of hell after killing his parents. Whereas others believe it's about a man going to war and then dying, never being able to see his family again. Either way, it's said that you should never, and I mean never, read this poem out loud. The curse is so strong that some people who have read this poem in their head have even felt ill while doing so. Now, I refuse to even look at the poem, let alone recite it. According to this legend, one person read the poem and ended up vomiting glass. Another person had their loved ones die a tragic death. In fact, one radio show host tried to read it out loud on air, and halfway through he started to feel ill and disturbed and wasn't able to finish it. He continued to feel ill, and a few days later he got into an accident that resulted in him having to get 7 stitches. So don't even think about reading it. And I mean, I say that, but I know you guys are Googling it as I speak. Coming in at number 2, we have Babadook. Also, do you guys say Babadook or Babadook? Because let me know which way is the right way. Politely, let me know. Anyways, the 2014 movie Babadook is pretty freaking creepy, not gonna lie. And of course, there's that famous scene in the movie with that creepy ass pop-up book. Well, fans loved it so much they wanted a copy of this book in real life. So the creators listened to the people and created limited copies of the Babadook book. In 2015, 6,200 pop-up books were created. Later, they did do a second release, but after that, they said they were no longer making any more copies of the book. People were then selling them on eBay for like $500. Anyways, a couple of people claimed that the book they received was cursed or haunted. Being in the same room as the book made them feel uneasy. They literally became super dizzy and sick. One person was even reading the book when she passed out. She woke up the next day on the couch with no recollection of what happened the night before. So be careful. These books might be cursed. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Endless Book. This is the name I have given to a cursed book that was purchased off of eBay. On the selling site, it was listed as a vintage beautiful notebook. It had this beautiful intricate design on the front with gold details and real gems in it. The pages were filled with someone else's drawings, doodles, and writing. But it came with a warning. It was cursed. The seller said that the book once belonged to her friend and it was her diary. But her friend ended up taking her life, and now apparently her soul is attached to her diary, and she haunts whoever owns the book. Now, the book was purchased by a woman who is obsessed with collecting vintage items. She thought the whole backstory was just a load of BS, a ploy to get the book to sell. That was until weird things started to happen to her. Drawings in the book would change, disappear, or switch pages. Writings would also appear and disappear. It's given me Tom Riddle's diary vibes from Harry Potter, not gonna lie. The freakiest part was the book was growing. Each day a page was getting added to the book, some blank, some with new drawings or new texts. Now, the woman was smart and ended up getting rid of the book. That was after the book literally gave her a warning. She woke up one day to the book open. The page it was on had "The End" written across the page in big red bold letters. It was written in blood. To this day, we don't know what happened to this cursed diary. Starting off this countdown, we have the King in Yellow. The King in Yellow is a cursed book that is said to drive readers into insanity. So this book is composed of a series of short stories written by a man named Robert Chambers. Apparently, the first act is fairly normal, so it entices you to keep reading. But once you get to Act 2, that's where it gets all weird and extremely dark. Here's what one person said about the book. The very banality and innocence of the first act only allowed the blow to fall afterward with more awful effect. Even seeing the first page of the second act is enough to draw the reader in. If I had not caught a glimpse of the opening words in the second act, I should never have finished it. Sounds intense, right? Well, it is. In fact, a number of people have claimed to have felt ill while reading this book. Others said they have woke up with weird bruises and scratches all over their bodies, or even had very vivid and dark night terrors. One individual posted online saying her friend got possessed by this book. She read the book, and every time there's mention of it, she'll go into this huge coughing fit. Not only that, one night she sent a bunch of weird messages to her friend saying stuff like, "Have you seen the yellow sign?" which is a reference to the book. The next day she checked her phone and had no memory whatsoever of sending these texts. After reading this book, her health literally started to decline. Somehow, she thinks she has fallen victim to this book's curse. Moving on to number 4, we have Death Note. Death Note is a fictional Japanese manga series about a notebook that will kill anyone whose name is written inside of it. But obviously, this isn't real, right? Well, this actually influenced a bunch of murders. For starters, in 2005 in China, several schools banned replica death notebooks that children were using. They were caught writing names of their peers and teachers in them, basically people they wished were dead. Same thing happened in 2007 in the States. In fact, a student in Virginia was suspended for having a death notebook. Then the murders started. In 2007 in Belgium, a dismembered corpse was found in a forest. Next to the body were 2 notes, both references to the Death Note series. The killer was a mystery for years. That was until 2010 when 3 suspects were convicted for this crime. Apparently, they were all fans of this series. With all that being said, there is a real cursed death notebook out there. Story goes that a man named Rob Thatcher was a huge fan of this show and decided to create one of his own. He wrote down the names of people he wanted gone, but obviously nothing happened. So he took it a step further by performing a satanic ritual. During this ritual, he cut his hand as a sacrifice to Satan and bled on the pages of the notebook. And guess what? It worked. The next day, one of his enemies got in a deadly car accident. It was late at night and he skidded off the road and died. The following week, his ex-girlfriend had a terrible allergic reaction that sent her to the hospital where she nearly died. And then the following week, another one of his victims died by taking his own life. So it's believed that his book is now cursed by the devil, and whoever's name is written in there will die.
In at 3, the Satanic Bible. Published in 1969 and written by Anton LaVey, the Satanic Bible is a collection of essays, observations, and rituals, and is the central text of Satanism. And it's also considered to be the foundation of its philosophy. The Bible is divided into 4 sections: the Book of Satan, the Book of Lucifer, the Book of Belial, and the Book of Leviathan, the latter offering invocations for sex, compassion, and destruction, as well as invocation of Satan. Thankfully, the Satanic Bible is not considered to be a sacred scripture, like the Christian Bible is to Christians, but Satanists do regard it as authoritative text. The Satanic Bible has been condemned by many for being dangerous, particularly to adolescents. As problematic as this book is, it is still available in most places, although many schools have made an attempt to ban the text. Few have been successful though. Coming in at number 2, the Necromancer's Manual, also known as the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. This book is a 15th century Grimry manuscript. This text is seen as a guidebook to evoke demonic entities. The book includes a variety of spells and rituals divided into 3 themes: illusionist, psychological, and divinatory. Not only that, but it was believed that this book was the tool to control people, time, and emotions. Yeah, there is no real way of knowing that someone isn't out there right now using this book to control you. Think about it. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Grand Grimoire. To put it simply, this book teaches you how to summon and control demons. Yep. Is there anything worse than that? No. The answer's no. Also known as the Red Dragon, this book was written in the early 19th century, with its publication date ranging from 1521 to 1522 or even 1421. It was authored by Antonio del Rabina, I hope I said that right, who had supposedly gathered his information from the original writings of King Solomon. The book contains instructions to summon Lucifer for the purpose of forming a deal with the devil. The Grand Grimoire is divided into two books, the first half containing the instructions for summoning a demon, and the second half divided into two further parts, the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets of the Magic Art of Grand Grimoire. The former contains instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing you to command it without the tools required in Book 1. The latter contains simple spells and rituals you can perform in order to complete the summoning and the controlling. All in all, it's not a book that should be placed in the hands of the morally ambiguous, let's just say that. Coming in at number 5, the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is arguably the most infamous on our list, to say the least. To begin, the book is written in an unknown writing system that many to this day are still attempting to decipher. It is unknown who wrote the book, but it is named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. The mystery of the book has excited people over the years, but we're still no closer to figuring out its contents or origins. Many have speculated that the book itself may be evil, and judging by the pictures included, may contain spells or incantations for summoning demons. But this is all speculation. There have been many people over the years who have claimed to have deciphered the text, from Robert S. Brumbaugh, who claimed that the manuscript was a forgery intended to fool Emperor Rudolf II into purchasing it, or Stephen Bax, who claimed that the manuscript was about nature, or even Nicholas Gibbs, who claimed it was a guide to women's health. We may never know what knowledge the book holds, perhaps at the end of the day it's a hoax, but some speculate it may be something evil that we should never attempt to uncover. In at 4, the Sworn Book of Honorius. This is a medieval grimoire written by Honorius of Thebes. It is the oldest existing medieval grimoire and arguably the most influential. The text contains incantations and invocations to induce visions from heaven, hell, and purgatory. It is also widely believed that the person who is capable of deciphering all the text will gain the access to all the knowledge in the world. Not too shabby. Now, its history is hazy, but the book is supposedly the product of a group of magicians who condensed all their knowledge into one book. Many of its instructions include how to conjure and command a demon, how to work other magical operations, as well as the knowledge of what lies in heaven, among other things. It has been classified as a Solomonic grimoire due to its heavy angelic powers, like those found in the Key of Solomon.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Book of Abramalin. Heading back in the direction of spellcasting and dark magic, here we have a tome written from the teachings of a mage. Apparently back in the 16th century, a traveling writer named Abraham came across an old wizened mage. This man had seen it all and was privy to some of the world's darkest secrets. The mage told Abraham all he knew, and Abraham took those lessons and wrote them down in a book. Interestingly enough, he dedicated this tome to his son. What's better than a book of forbidden knowledge from the old man, right? This mage taught Abraham many things, from how to raise the dead to how to conjure destructive spells. To achieve many of these effects, one would have to find and control their own personal demon. This act is very dangerous, as if the demon decides to break free, all hell could break loose. Literally. However, for those with the discipline and questionable morals to pull off such a feat, they could achieve things that many only dream of. Invisibility, flying, discovering hidden treasures, the works. At the turn of the 20th century, an English translation of the book was published, leading to all sorts of new rumors of curses and evil magic. So if you do manage to get your hands on a copy, be careful while perusing the contents. Coming in at number 2, the Voynich manuscript. Mysterious and malevolent, nobody has successfully decoded the contents of this book yet. That lack of understanding may contribute to its terrible power. For now, the safest thing to do would be to leave it alone, but curiosity always kills the cat. The origins are foggy at best, with many thinking that it dates back to the 15th century. However, others claim that aliens brought this book to Earth with the intent of destroying many inquisitive minds. While the book is now surrounded by rumors and claims that it brings misfortune wherever it goes, the decoding of the contents could bring about even more misery. It's said that whoever reads the book and understands it will release a powerful curse unto the world, one that will kill them, their loved ones, and anyone who investigates it further. It could even be a doomsday prophecy, with the successful reading of it leading to worldwide destruction. It's good to be inquisitive and look for new things, but I think this mystery is one best left unsolved. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Necronomicon. Literary historians would tell you that this is a made-up book invented by the father of cosmic horror himself, H.P. Lovecraft. He mentions such a tome in many of his bone-chilling stories as a source of great eldritch knowledge and a portal into realms unknown. It's a great plot device and symbol for all that man should not be privy to. However, a lot of people don't believe the story ends there. Some believe that Lovecraft lifted this idea from a real book,
one that's existed for ages and brings about chaos wherever it travels. We're no strangers to horrific incantations and demonic chants on this channel, so this should come as no surprise. But leaders of cults and crazies alike would love to get their hands on this book. It's been adapted and recreated for many purposes, showing up in alternate forms in pop culture at large. Often crafted from human flesh and full of images of unimaginable horrors, those who possess it inevitably go mad and summon something horrid into our world. The original Necronomicon is rumored to be under the watchful eye of the church, while others think that scholars of the ancient arts have been studying it for time immemorial. Regardless, don't go in expecting some light summer reading. Those who learn the teachings of the Necronomicon don't often remain sane or even human. Coming in number 5, we've got the Grand Grimoire. Well, with a name like that, you'd better hope it's imbued with some terrible power, otherwise what's the point? We discussed a grimoire in our last video that was more directed towards witches and other followers of Wicca. If you're part of that group, it's safe to read, otherwise you'd better watch out. This one is just straight up evil according to some. And when a book is this jam-packed with horrid, abominable information, people tend to take notice. It's been referred to as the Gospel of Satan, which is a fun genre to imagine. However, I would hazard a guess that most modern Satanists want nothing to do with it, as they tend to be more peace-loving and accepting. Back in the 16th century, a man claimed to be possessed by the devil. Whether this was Satan proper or one of many hideous demons inhabiting the fires of hell, I guess we may never know. Lots of demons who inhabit the bodies of the living like to pretend they're something that they're not, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was inspired by a different being than Satan himself. However, that doesn't make it any less scary. Some say that this is the deadliest book going, with lots of stories to back it up. Those who read it are privy to some incredibly dark secrets, from doom-bringing incantations to demon-summoning guides. You don't just get these lessons for free though. All this eldritch knowledge comes at a price. By simply opening the book and reading from its pages, you're essentially offering up your soul to whatever dark forces inhabit it. And the longer you stick around reading away, the more likely it is that something will take what is most precious to you. Usually reading plenty is good for you, but in this case you're playing with fire. The Grand Grimoire is rumored to be so dangerous that people have locked it away in the depths of the Vatican, protected by all sorts of holy implements. Others say that the real grimoire is still out there somewhere, circulating between occultists and evil spirits. This legend has staying power, and many have taken the idea of such a book and added it to other stories, from movies to video games to urban legends. Who knows, maybe the real Grand Grimoire is sitting in some unassuming thrift shop, waiting to be picked up by the right person. Coming in number 4, we've got Tomino's Hell. Veering off in a very different direction, we're going to take a look at a book that doesn't necessarily have hundreds of years of curses and evil energy imbued within it. Compared to a lot of these other books, it's a relatively new haunted tale, one hailing from Japan. It doesn't even need to physically be in the possession of the person reading it. All it takes to be cursed by this poem is to read it aloud. That's dangerous. Stories of this damned poem started showing up after the author, Saijo Yaso, published a collection of his work in 1919, so I guess it is over 100 years old now. Huh. After losing family members in World War I, he took the grief and pain he was experiencing and put it into words. It's not a very long poem, so you could definitely read it in one sitting. I'm not going to read it aloud today for obvious reasons, but we can do our best to summarize the tale and delve into the haunted story. A lot of the details are left up to interpretation, but the general idea here is that it tells the tragic tale of a girl who was left to die by her family. Not a pretty picture. Years later, as rumors circulated, a director decided to make a film based on the poem. After completing his project, he suddenly died with no explanation, causing people to worry even more. This helped the poem make its way into circulation as an urban legend. The internet helped a great deal, and a recounting of the tale in a more modern book did wonders as well. So nobody can be exactly sure where the cursed nature of the poem originated, whether it was the internal turmoil of Saijo Yaso, the unfortunate end of the director, or the general negative energy associated with it in the eye of the public. Regardless, this is one piece of writing that you do not want to be reciting. If you're extra brave though, give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. I will not be taking that risk today.
Number 3. The Grand Grimoire. Our next entry has been formally referred to as the Gospel of Satan. It's different from Satan's Bible, and is said to be a cursed book whose knowledge had to be sealed away to protect humanity. So this might be the most dangerous book ever published after Hop on Pop. The Grand Grimoire was said to have been penned by a priest in the 16th century who was possessed by a litany of demons who compelled the man to put their knowledge to paper. Acting as a scribe for the demons, the man wrote wrote everything they knew about dark incantations, spells, instructions on how to cast rituals, how to bind a demon to make it do your bidding. Wait, a demon wrote this book? A demon gave instructions about how it wants to be bound to a human and serve humans? That's a freaky little demon. That's not all though. There's a step-by-step recipe for a little necromancy if you're down to dabble in some dark arts and make some bones dance to your rhythm. The book really covers all the fun stuff you've been told not to do. Now it's not all brimstone and hellfire too. There's rituals on how to manipulate your luck, how to conduct a seance, and I think this is adorable. But there's even ways to make people love you in the book. Now, a little dating tip from your friends at Top 5 Scary. I will say, if you need a demon's help to make them like you, that might not be the most successful relationship, but you do you. Don't let me get in the way. Now, if all of this is sounding pretty appealing, and I don't blame you because it all does sound really cool, just know that the book is considered high treason. Even so much as cracking the spine is considered equivalent to selling your soul, so maybe hold off on that Amazon order for a bit. Besides, because of the book's cursed reputation, the original copy is said to be locked away in the Vatican's famous secret archives, and no matter how many times you ask, they're not going to let you look at it, even if you say you just want to take a quick little peek at the illustrations. I know, so unfair. Ugh, I don't even have any late fees. Let me take the book out. Number 2, the Untitled Grimoires. You think a book with a name is scary? Imagine a book without a name. Coming up next on our list of haunted nighttime reading is the Untitled Grimoires. It was so scary they couldn't even deign to give it a name. The books are said to originate from a Wiccan high priestess named Persephone Adarasta Irene, who has one of the coolest names I've ever heard. She recorded a book of her family's spiritual history. These manuscripts record Persephone's Wiccan history that she reworked all through her adult life. The first book contains around 250 pages of spells, incantations, curses, enchantments, and some information on gems, planets, rites, potions, and exorcisms. Basically anything and everything that a fledgling sorceress or warlock could ever possibly want. The second book is a little more light, the sequel's a bit of a letdown. It's just alchemy, chemistry, cures, perfumes, and tonics. Now, the first book is believed to be the one to carry the curse, as Persephone's spells are believed in Wiccan culture to contain more power than most other records due to her embodiment of her own soul inside the book. They say all authors put a bit of soul in their work, and it seems as if the Wiccan high priestess took that a bit more literally than most of us do. These books would eventually find their way into the possession of one Alice Montserrat, a close working associate of Aleister Crowley, who you know from earlier in the video as one of the most famous practicers of the occult and lover of white horses. Montserrat left an inscription in the first page of the book, warning to all of those who open it, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft." This was written in several languages to make sure it came across to just about anybody who opened the book. Now, I'm kind of unclear on that. I don't know, some of the old words, the old English is kind of confusing me. Does that mean the book should be read like it's good? I don't know. Not really getting that. And finally, coming in at her number 1 spot today on demonic dictionaries and evil literature is the infamous Lesser Key of Solomon. Make no mistake from the title, even though it's a Lesser Key of Solomon, it is not a lesser evil. It's an anonymously authored grimoire on demonology, so not written by Solomon. It's also known as Clavicula Salomonis Regis or Lemegeton, is a grimoire. It's a book of magic that gained significant prominence in occult literature. Now, the grimoire is attributed to King Solomon, the biblical figure renowned for his wisdom and mastery over supernatural forces. It's believed to have been compiled in the 17th century, though it draws upon earlier occult tradition and texts. The Lesser Key consists of several sections, or books, each focusing on a different aspect of magic and summoning. The most well-known is the Ars Goetia, which represents descriptions and instructions for evoking 72 demons or spirits, each with its own unique powers and abilities, kind of like Pokemon. These demons are said to be bound by King Solomon and can be summoned and controlled by skilled practitioners. Other sections of the Lesser Key of Solomon includes fan favorites like the Ars Theurgia Goetia, Ars Paulina, Ars Almadel, and Ars Notoria. These sections delve into topics such as angelic invocations, the use of talismans and amulets, and rituals for obtaining divine knowledge and wisdom. Now, the grimoire has had a profound influence on various occult and magical traditions, including ceremonial magic, demonology, and the practice of spirit conjuration. It's been studied and referenced by countless practitioners practitioners, scholars, and scary YouTubers throughout history. Now, goes without saying, this is a potentially dangerous text. The act of summoning and working with entities described in the grimoire is not for the faint of heart, and really should be saved for those with a bit of spiritual expertise under their wizard hat. In conclusion, significant grimoire number 5, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is a Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't this initial publication that gave it such a notoriety. There wasn't really a lot of book reviewing going on back then. It was when it was upheld by the 19th and 20th century magicians who made up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which kind of sounds like a fake bad guy from an RPG, but is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. Can't be that secret though, because I'm talking about it. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, one SLM Matters, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a 17th century French translation. Mathers' translation became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley, the legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. There's all kinds of spells and magic inside the text. Some highlights include spells on how to conjure someone into a donkey, summon a monkey to do your bidding, how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The key point in the text, however, is an epic multi-month ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their guardian angel other half. The book posits that everyone's guardian angel is another part of their essence, a spiritual other. The ritual involves, I don't really know how to say this politely. You have to get blissfully intimate with the angel, and once this honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them, and then will be able to be master of the spirit domain. That all sounds pretty complicated though, honestly, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. I don't really need to mess with magic, that's above my pay grade, and I'm not looking to get too intimate with my significant other guardian angel anytime soon. But if you're looking for more true tales of terror, fake frightening fibs, cursed relics, ancient evils, ancient cryptids, aliens, conspiracies, ghouls, goblins, and way more of this guy, Top 5 Scary is the only place to be. So stay subscribed, make sure you hit that little bell so you don't miss a scream, and I know this is a big ask, do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more cursed books coming for you right now. Number 4, the Codex Gigas. When it comes to cursed and demonic books, the Codex Gigas is one of the biggest ones around. Like, literally. Codex Gigas translates to giant book, which isn't a very scary name, but when you see the size of this behemoth, it starts to make a bit more sense. The thing is massive, 2 feet long. While giant oversized illuminated manuscripts were fairly common around this era, this one stood out for its immense size and also the impressively scary rumors surrounding the cursed text. It's occasionally been dubbed Satan's Bible due to the interesting legend behind its origin. Now, supposedly the story goes that a monk by the name of Herman the Recluse, which same, honestly. Anyway, Herman was condemned to death for heresy and was to be walled up alive and starved. In a desperate plea to save himself, Herman tried to convince the prior and the abbot that if he could pen a manuscript to honor God's glory and contained all of human knowledge and history in one night, that he could be let free. The abbot agreed, thinking that this was, of course, an impossible task. Well, he didn't know that Herman was the John Wick of penmanship, who wrote until midnight, wearing his fingertips down, and in a moment of desperation, made a prayer to Lucifer, and asked for his eternal soul in exchange for the book's completion in order to repent for his heresy. I totally get it, I've done some pretty crazy things trying to write my script in time for a deadline too. I sold my soul earlier this week to get Top 5 UFOs in on time. I get it. Now, not poking any holes in your logic here though, Herman, but I will say maybe selling your soul to the devil is part of the reason you got into this mess, because that actually sounds a ton like heresy. A variation of the legend states that Herman worked for years on the manuscript, day and night, but still asked for the devil's assistance anyway, the lazy bastard. Anyway, the legend states that Satan signed the Bible with an illustration of himself. The ego on that guy. The book contains a birth of information. Like they said, it was supposed to be everything humanity had attained up to that point. Now, these days, the Codex Gigas is preserved in the Natural Museum in Sweden, where you can admire the line work of Herman the Recluse and his ghost author, Satan.
Coming in number 3, we've got the Orphan story. So make sure you're looking very carefully at the books you're picking up. There are quite a few hardcovers and paperbacks adorned with titles similar to The Orphan Story. It could be Orphan Story, or The Orphan Story, or even just Orphan's Story. Hell, I do believe that there are books written this century called, word for word, The Orphan Story, but not the same as the tale we're about to tell. What a world, right? It's almost like orphans are classic literary tropes that get people engaged in stories quickly. Who doesn't love a good found family tale? But I'm getting off track. This tale was originally penned in the 1600s by Martin de Leon Cardenas. There's nothing particularly scary about the story itself. It's about a young Spaniard who heads to America in search of fortune. But for some reason, everyone who became involved in the publication of this book met with a grisly fate. Editors and translators who had previously worked on it died in terrible car crashes or succumbed to deadly illnesses. It seemed to go all the way back to the original story too. Hundreds of years of people attempting to get a book published only to be killed in upsetting ways. It's a wonder it got published at all. In 2018, the book was finally published, so you can head out and read it now. Although with a legacy like that, do you really want to flip through those pages? Coming in at number 2, we've got the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. Who knew this was even a thing? What I like about this entry is the fact that I can make this joke now. That's right, you should be praying before you crack open a Bible because that's what people tend to do already. Heyo. Can't take full credit for that joke though because Lindsay made it to me first, so laugh away. Now, back to the actual demonic properties of this book. The Codex Gigas is an extremely large medieval illuminated manuscript containing a number of alphabets, the entire Latin Bible, the history of the Jews, medical works, the New Testament, necrology, magic formula, and more. It's known as the Devil's Bible because of the unusual illustration of a devil inside. Most Bibles tend to avoid full-page drawings of Satan. This relates back to a legend concerning this tome where a monk was accused of breaking a vow to his master. As punishment, he was to be walled up and left there. Before he could be sealed away, however, the monk desperately promised to make a book that would glorify the monastery forever. It would include all of human knowledge, a lofty goal indeed. So he set to making this beautiful book, filled with intricate calligraphy, illustrations, and embellishments. As the clock was about to run out, he realized he was still 10 pages short. In order to get it done on time and save his life, he made a deal with the fallen angel Lucifer, his soul in exchange for the completed book. Lucifer took this deal, completed the book, and had the monk put an illustration of him inside as thanks. Nowadays, under plenty of scrutiny, scholars have estimated that a book this complex would have taken something like 20 years to make, and that's without all the illustrations. Just the calligraphy. Holy smokes. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Book of Soya. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. I know it sounds like something along the lines of Ligma, but I promise you don't want to post about this. If you begin writing about it or learning its secrets, you might be driven mad. That's exactly what happened to a scholar by the name of John Dee. He came into possession of this 16th century Latin essay on demonology and became obsessed. Down the rabbit hole he went, struggling to figure out what secrets the book might hold. He discovered that it was full of dark rituals and potentially dangerous incantations, but beyond that he couldn't really make heads or tails of it. Eventually he lost his mind. He began reaching out to people to act as mediums through which he could communicate with angels. In doing so, he apparently discovered that the book was unreadable to anyone other than the Archangel Michael. Bummer. After Dee's death, many others have attempted to make sense of this ancient tome, but to no avail. Coming in number 5, we've got Spindrift. Before we get into all of the grimoires and Necronomicons and Devil Bibles, we gotta pay our respects to a good old-fashioned spooky novel? Autobiography? A little mix of the two. Curling up with a creepy pile of pages on a chilly fall day, maybe with a cup of your favorite hot beverage by your side, is unmatched. If you haven't tried it yet, I beg you to forego streaming services for one day and really soak in that paperback atmosphere. Right, so once you've experienced that unique joy, you can die a happy death, which just might happen if you stumble across a copy of Spindrift. Upon first glance, this book looks like any other pulpy horror book from the 70s. However, there's definitely a lot more than meets the eye. It reads partially like a novel, sort of like an autobiography, and somewhat like an account of a haunting. The tale is that of an author, Jan Bryant Bartell, and her experiences while living with her husband in the supposedly haunted death house of Greenwich Village. Before the couple moved in, the house already had quite the reputation. Mark Twain had resided there, and even as a skeptic, he was often unsettled by the unexplainable happenings. Families moved in and out, oftentimes falling victim to tragic fates. This had a great impact on Bartell in particular, who seemed to unlock some latent psychic potential at the house. During her time here, all sorts of horrid events transpired. Her pet dog died, news of others in her life perishing came to her, and she noticed all sorts of presences throughout the house. This caused a great deal of trepidation and terror, and eventually drove the couple off the property. After witnessing 9 deaths during her stay, Bartel wanted to be as far away as possible. Following this move, she decided to commit her story to page and wrote Spindrift. She spared no detail in this extremely personal account of the haunting, and eventually did finish the initial manuscript. Unfortunately, she became the 10th victim to the house. After completing the manuscript, Bartel passed away, supposedly followed by the curse. People who read this book claim to feel a very spooky presence while flipping through the pages. There haven't been any accounts of readers falling victim yet, but I'd still be careful while reading. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Untitled Grimoires. Here we go, some real spooky stuff. When you hear the term grimoire, you know you're in for some haunted volumes, that's for sure. Especially if they remain untitled, adding to the mystery and allure. How positively chilling. These 2 tomes became objects of intrigue back in 2013 when they were sold through an online auction. They fetched quite a hefty price, coming in at around $14,000. For any other spiral-bound notebooks, that asking price would be outrageous, but the history surrounding these grimoires makes them worth every penny. Apparently they were penned by none other than Persephone Adrastia Irene, a Wiccan high priestess with a coven full of devoted followers. She was quite the spellcaster and filled the books with all sorts of magical knowledge. Over 200 pages of enchantments, incantations, summons, and spells can be found by the owner of these books. Summoning rituals for demons and spirits are a major factor here too. However, the books came with a grave warning. Any non-witches should avoid them at all costs, as Persephone left a little message behind for them. It reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution. You will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." The actual threat is quite vague, but with all of the possible spells and curses and hexes listed in the book, one can assume that their punishment would have something to do with that. So if you're not praying to the goddesses of Wicca before cracking open one of these, maybe consider what you're doing. Life is hard enough without additional magical mayhem invading. You can choose not to read the Untitled Grimoires.
Number 3. The Book of Soya. This 16th century treatise on magic, written in Latin, came into the possession of the former advisor of Queen Elizabeth I and famous mathematician, astrologer, alchemist, and occultist John Dee in the year 1580. The book was filled with spells and instructions on how to summon demons, but most curious of all were the several pages which were covered in more than 40,000 letters, all seemingly distributed at random. John Dee spent 2 years trying to crack the code that would allow him to read the book, but could not. In 1582, his colleague and fellow occultist Edward Kelly offered to perform a seance using a special mirror which would allow the Archangel Uriel to speak through him. They performed the ritual, with Dee recording the dialogue between himself and the angel in his spiritual diaries. Dee began the conversation by asking, "Is my Book of Soya of any excellency?" The angel replied in Latin that the pages of the book were indeed special and were revealed to Adam by the good angels of God in the Garden of Eden. When asked if he could help them translate the tablets of letters which comprised the final 36 pages of the book, the angel responded that only the Archangel Michael had the power to decipher it. Dee would spend several more years failing to decipher the final pages of the book, while concerned at the rumors that the book was cursed and would bring death to anyone who translated it within 2.5 years. The book eventually went missing and was considered lost to history, with the only references to it being in Dee's various diaries. This changed in 1994, when a John Dee scholar searched the British Library. It had been searched many times before, but all the previous searchers had made the mistake of looking for it under the letter S for Soya, instead of using the book's alternate title described in one of Dee's diaries, Alderia Sive Soya Vocor. The scholar found 2 copies of the book using this method. In 2006, a mathematician was able to use a computer to analyze the 46,656 letters of the tables and discover the different keyword that each coded page used. This also revealed that the spelling errors between the 2 books proved that they were both actually copies of an even older text of unknown origin. The author of these texts is still unknown, and though the supposed angel said it was dictated to Adam by angels, the idea of angels in the Garden of Eden teaching Adam how to summon demons seems inconsistent with the established biblical lore. Is this supposedly cursed coded grimoire actually authored by some sinister and malevolent force? And what purpose was the book intended to fill? The more we learn about this book, the more mysterious it seems to get. Number 2. The Grand Grimoire. Sporting the alternate name of the Gospel of Satan, this 16th century book has the reputation of being one of the most terrifying books on occultism ever written. The book is filled with instructions to summon not only demons, but the devil himself in order to sell your soul to Old Scratch. It describes in great details the rituals that will let you call forth Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth, as well as 6 lesser demons, and also contains spells that will, among other things, let you win the lottery, talk to spirits, make someone fall in love with you, and turn yourself invisible. The book's ritual instructions are very intense, with some spells calling for house pets like cats to be sacrificed and skinned and popped into a pot. The original copy of this book is currently being kept under lock and key in the Vatican archives, but other versions are available for purchase, such as the Kindle version, which you can own for $1.75, which is a great deal for something that will apparently let you turn invisible and then win the lottery. Of course, the additional cost of your pet cat and your soul may add up. The name of the original author is unknown. However, legends and rumors state that the author wrote the text while being possessed by the devil, which I suppose makes him Satan's ghostwriter. Number 1. The Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is a coded book that was believed to have been written at some point in the early 15th century. It was discovered in a locked chest in Rome in the year 1912, and deciphering its history and, more importantly, its meaning has been a goal of several different scholars for many years before and since. Its first known owner was believed to be Rudolph II. Rudolph apparently thought that the mysterious book had been written by Roger Bacon, and purchased the book for a huge amount of money, roughly 600 ducats of gold. The first 100% confirmed owner of the text was an alchemist named George Barish, who found the mysterious book in his personal library, unsure of its origin. It was passed from him to a variety of scholars, emperors, and officials, all of whom failed to decipher its bizarre text and illustrations. Several of the world's best cryptographers from the First and Second World War have tried to decipher its 240 pages, and have not found any way to read the book. Some of the pictures include detailed sketches of plants that are not found in nature, and zodiac signs. As you might expect, there are several theories about the purpose and the author of this book, with some believing that it was a herbology text written in a lost shorthand, and others having more outlandish theories that it was created by aliens from another world. One theory is that the book was written by either a demon or the devil himself, and that anyone who manages to translate its contents will unleash a curse upon the world. A theory they believe is bolstered by the fact that several people who have attempted a translation have gone on to suffer several years of bad fortune. Whether the origin of this book is human or demonic in nature, it is still the most mysterious and curiosity-inducing book in human history. Number 5. The Necronomicon. To ease our way into this list, let's begin with a supposedly completely fictional book, created by the famous writer H.P. Lovecraft. Also referred to as the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon appears in several of Lovecraft's stories where it was supposedly written in the early 1700s by an Arabic man named Abdul al-Hazrad, who was a devotee of the demonic deities Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu, before he was apparently horribly devoured by an invisible demon in front of a presumably very confused and very terrified crowd. After this, the work was apparently translated and passed down over the years, having versions made in Greek, Latin, and English, while simultaneously being banned by various political and religious figures throughout history. Lovecraft was very sparing with the details about the contents and appearance of the book, believing that the mystery made it more frightening, though sections of it are quoted in his stories, such as the famous couplet appearing in The Nameless City, which goes, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die." Over the years, Lovecraft was asked several times if the Necronomicon was in fact a real book, but he would always answer that it was not, and that the idea came to him in a dream. Of course, a number of paranormal enthusiasts believe that this dream was actually a vision given to Lovecraft by the demonic entities, and over the years, many famous libraries who people believe are hiding copies of the book, such as the Vatican Library, often receive requests from eager readers wanting to know the secrets of life and death, supposedly enclosed within the pages of the Necronomicon. The Book of the Dead appears in many other works of fiction, with Lovecraft's approval, as he believed that different authors using common allusions helped to build a background of evil verisimilitude. Is the Necronomicon a real book, or is it just a piece of fiction that has managed to take on a life of its own? Well, it depends who you ask. Number 4. The Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a grimoire compiled in the 17th century from materials that were already centuries old at the time of the book's original publication. The volume is divided into 5 books, one of which contains instructions on how to grant the practicing magician an eidetic memory and the ability to instantly learn materials. Another of the books teaches the user how to contact angels using a wax tablet and a method known as scrying. 2 of the other books describe the 24 different angels and their relation to the 24 hours in the day, and the 360 spirits of the degrees of the zodiac. However, the Lesser Key's most famous book is known as Ars Goetia, which contains 72 sigils, each representing a different demon, as well as instructions on how to summon the 72 demons, and even how to control them. Before you go searching for a copy at Barnes & Noble, consider the following. The Lesser Key of Solomon is apparently a cursed book, with anyone who owns a copy of it reportedly being subject to constant bad luck, or in some cases, even death. Some owners of the book have reported seeing the pages turning by themselves, and even flying across the room, while hearing whispers and seeing dark shadow people. If this warning has reached you too late, and you have already fallen victim to this horrible curse, the good news is that it can apparently be broken by burning all the pages and disposing of the ashes. No one knows for sure who wrote the Lesser Key of Solomon. Some of course believe that it was written by King Solomon himself as a gift for his son, but others believe that it was actually dictated by some of the 72 demons in order to give themselves a means of crossing over to our world. Whoever actually wrote it, I hope that it was done with the purpose of helping us control the dark forces that are knocking on the door of reality, and not the other way around.
Number 3 on this list is the Handbook of Ritual Power. Anything called the Handbook of Ritual Power probably deserves to be on the list. Owen Jarvis details this book nicely by writing, "This 20-page codex dates back around 1,300 years and is written in Coptic. It contains a variety of magical spells and formulas including love spells, spells for curing black jaundice, and instructions on how to perform an exorcism. The text may have been written by a group of Sethians, an ancient Christian sect who held Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, in high regard. The opening of the text references a mysterious figure named Bactiotha, whose identity is unknown. I give thanks to you, and I call upon you, the Bactiotha, the Great One who is very untrustworthy, the one who is Lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents," a translation of the text reads. The researchers who translated and analyzed the text call it a Handbook of Ritual Power. It is now housed at the Museum of Ancient Cultures at Macquarie University in Sydney. The university purchased the codex in 1981 from a Vienna-based antiquities dealer named Michael Fackelman. Where Fackelman got it from is unknown. Spells, formulas, black jaundice, all of this sounds quite a lot like some of the other books that we've looked at in the first 2 parts of this series. A book that probably teaches humans some skills that we simply aren't ready to receive. A book that, if it fell into the wrong hands, somebody with evil intentions, could prove to be really, really bad. There are things that need to be left in the hands of higher beings, and making somebody fall in love with someone else may just be one of them. Keep this book locked up and away from prying eyes. Number 2 on this list is the Dresden Codex. Owen Jarvis details once again the Dresden Codex beautifully by writing, "The Dresden Codex is a Mayan text dating back around 800 years. It contains 39 beautifully illustrated sheets with texts and images on both sides. Research published in 2016 in the Journal of Astronomy and Culture indicates that the Codex records the phases of the planet Venus so that the Maya would be certain that their ceremonial events were being held on the correct day. The Maya had a really elaborate ritual set of events that were tied to the calendar," study researcher Geraldo Aldana, a science historian at the University of California, Santa Barbara, told Live Science. They were probably doing large-scale ritual activities connected to the different phases of Venus. Now, for those who don't know, Venus, albeit a very beautiful planet, is often tied to Lucifer. It should also be noted that the Mayans were known to perform the occasional human sacrifice, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that this text most likely contains dates when human sacrifices are to be performed. The Dresden Codex would have acted as an agenda to make sure that our Mayans kept on track with their sacrificial rituals to honor Venus. For this reason, it's thought that this codex is cursed with the souls of those who were sacrificed. It's also very dangerous to perform any of these rituals, as they will likely involve the loss of human life and potentially reaching out to some very dangerous gods. This is the oldest surviving Maya book, and for that reason needs to be kept around for research, but I wouldn't recommend the average person giving it a read. And finally, number 1 on this list is Liber Linteus. This text is currently considered to be the longest lasting Etruscan text in all of history. It dates back to the 3rd century BCE, and because not much is known about the Etruscan language, it remains mostly untranslated. However, experts who study such things have been able to decipher some of it and have discovered that the text was a ritual calendar, a collection of dates with specific rituals to be performed on said dates. The exact details of these rituals are unknown, but we assume them to be centered around human sacrifices and things of that nature. This is already enough to fear this book, but what makes it inherently cursed is how the pages were used for several thousand years. Mihailo Beric was a low-ranking Croatian official who, in 1848, decided to leave his position and travel to Egypt. While he was there, he decided to purchase a sarcophagus with a mummy inside. Why someone would want a coffin with a preserved dead body in it is beyond me, but apparently this was pretty cool to own back then. Anyways, he takes this mummy back to his home in Vienna and stands it upright in the corner of one of his rooms. It wasn't until after he died though and his brother donated the mummy to the State Institute of Croatia that somebody realized what the mummy was covered with. The bandages that preserved the mummy were covered in writing. These bandages were the Liber Linteus and had been used as rags for this mummy for centuries. Now this text is locked in a refrigerated room in the Archaeological Museum of Croatia, and for good reason. Not only is the writing of this text potentially very dangerous, but people believe that the spirit of this dead mummy haunts the rags and that they're cursed. Those that come into contact with them, or God forbid, read them, could have some very tragic events befall them. For this reason, I highly recommend staying away from the Liber Linteus at all costs. Number 5 on this list is the Treatise of the Vessels. The year is 1981. Harrison Ford has already taken the big screen a few times, but is he a leading actor? Yes, Raiders of the Lost Ark takes to the screen, and the beautiful George Lucas and Steven Spielberg brainchild officially solidifies Harrison Ford as being an elite A-lister in Hollywood. Well, this beautiful brainchild of theirs didn't just come out of thin air, but it was very likely inspired by the Treatise of the Vessels. This text is said to talk about some priceless treasures from King Solomon along with the Ark of the Covenant. If found, these would be some of the most valuable things ever rediscovered in all of human history. When there's gold, people are going to come, and the same thing applies here. There are riches galore to be found if someone is able to get to the bottom of this mystery, and the secrets may be within the Treatise of the Vessels. The thing is, it doesn't tell you the exact location of the Ark, so our daring explorers will need to find out for themselves. In case you didn't know, the Ark of the Covenant is said to hold tablets containing the 10 Commandments. The rest of the treasure is described in the treatise as being 77 tables of gold, and their gold was from the walls of the Garden of Eden that was revealed to Solomon, and they radiated like the radiance of the sun and moon, which radiate at the height of the world. So yeah, it's all pretty freaking good stuff. Although, I don't know if y'all remember the end of Harrison Ford's massive breakout movie, but discovering the Ark of the Covenant may not be the best thing ever. In fact, it's said that touching the Ark of the Covenant will result in death by the hands of God. That's why some people think this whole thing is cursed. Yes, if you actually found this thing, then you might be the most wealthy person in the world, but it may also kill you in the process. You also may never find it at all and dedicate your life to nothing. I'd say that you can probably read this thing, just leave the exploring to our main man Indy. Number 4 on this list is the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is definitely an interesting one, largely because no one has any idea what it's saying. This is a 250-page book where pretty much all of the words are in an unfamiliar language that we can't seem to decipher. The reason that people think this thing is inherently cursed isn't just because of the gibberish though, it's because of the pictures that go along with said gibberish. Cosmological symbols, weird plants doing weird things, and nude women doing some other weird things are all over this book. It should also be stated that the manner of the drawings are just plain creepy. Like, there's nothing inherently evil or cursed about a plant or a naked woman, but the way that the book has drawn them out really does give me some serious devil vibes. Because of this, people worry that the book may be cursed. That potentially this is a book from the underworld which somehow made its way to our world. This is why we can't understand the words, but a demon would be able to pick it up no problem. Experts have researched the language, and although they don't know what it is, have discovered some hallmarks that indicate it is a real language of some kind. Therefore, it could be some kind of demonic tongue that we aren't familiar with. Granted, it could also be some other ancient language that's just been lost in time. Demonic language or ancient language, I think based on the drawings, it's clear that whatever is said is probably not PG stuff. Who knows how many gruesome or questionable things this book has been part of in its lifetime. Considering you wouldn't be able to read it anyways, I'd just avoid it altogether. Number 3 on this list is Lawn Boy. This story, written by Jonathan Evison, is one of the most challenged books in America in 2021, and honestly, folks, it really shouldn't be. Esquire says Lawn Boy is the big-hearted story of Mike Munoz, a young Chicano striver working on a landscaping crew in Washington. As Mike fights against the soul-crushing forces of classism and racism to achieve his American dream, he also comes to terms with his sexual identity. Though the novel was written for an adult audience, teens fell in love with Lawn Boy, leading it to be awarded an Alex Prize, an award bestowed by the Young Adult Library Services Association to books written for adults that resonate with teens. Critics slammed the book for the LGBTQ content and sexually explicit material, pointing to a sexual encounter between two young men. Evison has received hate mail and death threats as a result of campaigns to ban his book, but he remains uncode. When I look at the wealth of great literature that enlightened souls have sought to ban through the ages, how could I feel anything but pride to be listed among them, he wrote. To those who would ban my book and burn me at the stake because they are ashamed of their own past experiences or uncomfortable with any non-binary sexual identifications, I hope you find healing. And literally, guys, shout out Jonathan on that one. When I found out that this book was something that people were trying to ban in literally 2021, it kind of blew my mind. Like, sometimes I think that the world is past stuff like that, and I do want to say that I think most people are. Like in America, 87% of people don't think that books should get banned. So at the very least, regardless of their views on things, they think that there should be a freedom of speech or writing. Either way, the government hasn't actually forbidden you from reading this book. People tried to do that. And I say, you shouldn't listen to them. Number 2 on this list is Animal Farm. So if you wanted to read Animal Farm now, then you probably wouldn't have too hard of a time getting your hands on a copy. But back in the day, this wasn't always the case. In fact, the government for a long time wanted nothing to do with the book. Spyscape says Animal Farm was a target of censors and spies. The satire revolves around farm animals who rebel, hoping to create an equal society. Instead, they end up living under Napoleon, a dictatorial pig. The USSR saw it as a critique of its politics and banned the book. The UAE briefly banned Animal Farm because of its talking pigs seen to be against Islamic values. The CIA, meanwhile, turned it into a propaganda tool and funded an animated movie of the same name, although spies changed the book's ending. If we think about it logically for a second, it makes sense why a government wouldn't want Animal Farm to get read by the general public. This is especially heightened when we think about it from the perspective of a controlling government like the USSR was. In their brain, they probably saw this book as a bit of a threat. The public reads it and then starts getting some sneaky ideas about how they're going to revolt and start their own new country with a totally new government. And then this even goes a step further because the CIA starts started pushing this book and marketing it as something against the USSR. What was a fictional story turned into this whole political thing caught between the two biggest superpowers in the world when it was released. And number 1 on this list is the Anarchist Cookbook. This book has had a roller coaster of a life since it was written. Big Thing says, since it was first written in 1971, much of its information is out of date. But some topics, like how to make improvised bombs, don't have an expiration date. The book provides instructions for making LSD and tear gas, primers on how to operate various firearms, how to sabotage different kinds of infrastructure, and writing on anarchist philosophy. The book was written by William Powell, a manager of a bookstore in Greenwich Village. Powell quit his job, however, to write the Anarchist Cookbook. My motivation at the time was simple, said Powell in an article for The Guardian. I was being actively pursued by the US military, who seemed single-mindedly determined to send me to fight and possibly die in Vietnam. Its countercultural, violent message proved popular today. It is sold in excess of 2 million copies. It should come as no surprise that the book is infamous and controversial, but the kinds of criticism it attracts varies depending on the source. Governments across the world clearly have a negative opinion of the book. It does, after all, advocate for violent civil disobedience. The Anarchist Cookbook is banned in Australia. In the UK, possessing the book, though not illegal itself, has often been used as evidence in terrorism cases. A teenager was accused of and later acquitted of a plot to assassinate British National Party members in 2008. In 2017, a 27-year-old who had traveled to Syria and possessed a copy was accused of being a terrorist. It turned out that he had merely printed a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook for use in a role-playing game in a university society. So clearly the government does not like this book at all. I think it's a bit much for people to be accused of certain things just by owning the book, but I also kind of see why it happens based on the contents of the text. Just be aware that if you pick this book up, then the government may start keeping tabs on you. Number 5 on this list is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You may be familiar with this title because there was actually a movie adaptation that hit the screen super recently. Back in 2019, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark came out in film format. But this movie was based off of a book, and for the longest time, this book was super banned. SCMP says this one stands out on the list because unlike the other banned or challenged books, Scary Stories is not political and it doesn't contain any references to drugs or sex. So why were these collections of horror stories so controversial? Some of the stories could be pretty scary and parents felt that they were inappropriate for their children, which is fair considering these are stories about being buried alive, cannibalism, and way more. But for many people, the real issue was the artwork by Stephen Gammell, an incredibly talented illustrator who no doubt caused nightmares for thousands of children since the book's first publication in 1981. So literally, guys, this book got banned because it was too scary. Think about that for a second. The author literally did too good of a job at making a horror book that people thought no one should read it. If I was the guy who wrote this, then I wouldn't know whether to take that as a compliment or like a criticism, to be honest. The people who banned this thing couldn't hold it down forever though, because at the end of the day, it is some great literature for those who love horror. Number 4 on this list is Fire and Fury. Now, this one I felt like I had to bring up because it happened really recently with the former president of the United States. Skyscape says Wolf's gossipy tell-all describes a dysfunctional presidency perpetually in chaos, zoning in at one point on the day the FBI director James Comey was fired. Comey heard about it on TV. Not all of Wolf's claims are accepted as truth, of course. Trump said he didn't authorize Wolf's White House access and didn't speak to him for the first book. Trump's lawyer Charles Harder sent a cease and desist letter threatening a libel lawsuit in an effort to stop publication. Fire and Fury sold out in its first day of a release as a result. By 2021, Trump was speaking to Wolf for landslide, Wolf's third book in the trilogy. There were countless scandals during the Trump administration, so I feel like this one was just another notch on the belt. Either way though, the government literally did everything in their power to try and get rid of it and stop us from being able to buy it. The opposite happened though, and because it got so much attention, it flew off the shelves faster than they could print them. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Abramelin. Abraham was an Egyptian mage who lived between 1362 and 1458 and dedicated his life to magic. Once Abraham visited Egypt, and there he met a magician, not that magician which you see on TV shows, but that who really knows dark magic and dark secrets. He told Abraham many dark and mysterious secrets and strange things which you and I can never imagine. He told him how to live the dead person, the location of under-earth treasures, how to contact devils. Besides this, he also told him the secrets of becoming invisible and flying in the sky. That last passage that I just read was written by Sharik Kamal while he was listing the most cursed books of all time. This book is known to be dangerous, and it isn't just because of the contents in it either. Yes, summoning the dead and performing dark magic in its own right is very dangerous and has the potential to cause serious problems for you and those around you. This book though may just be inherently cursed to begin with. Many people who have read this book, even those who don't go on to perform any of the rituals or incantations that the book describes, have gotten horribly bad luck afterwards. Like the second they opened up the book and started reading, their entire life just flipped on its side. Some have said that afterwards their home became haunted by some dark spirit and they had to move. It's almost as if the book itself is a portal to another demonic dimension, and just the action of opening it could cause something to leak out. I'm sure that Abraham was a great writer, but no book is worth dying over, so I won't be reading this one anytime soon. Number 2 on this list is the Great Omar. This book is believed to be the cause of one of the most tragic disasters in all of human history, sinking the unsinkable ship, the Titanic. No, you don't catch Leonardo DiCaprio reading this book in the 1997 movie version, but maybe he should have. This book, even though it is deeply cursed, is potentially the most ornate and beautiful books to have ever been created. In fact, it took over 2,500 hours to create this book, which translates to over 100 full days. One would think that a book of this kind would fetch quite the pretty penny, but that actually wasn't the case. In fact, the man who binded this book, Francis Sangorsky, had an extremely hard time trying to sell it to anyone. Finally, he did find a home for it in America and was in the process of sending it over there, but it never reached its destination though, because it was on the Titanic. Now, the reason that people think this book had something to do with the unsinkable ship sinking is because only a week or so after the ship had gone down, so did Sangorsky. He died by drowning to death a very short time after the book had also sunk to the bottom of the ocean. This is why people believe that something about this book will curse those around it and potentially lead to someone drowning. I personally think it's a bit of a stretch to just assume that having this book caused the entire Titanic to sink. However, it is a remarkable coincidence what happened to Sangorsky. It probably won't ever happen, but if this book ever did wash ashore one day, I wouldn't want to be the one to pick it up first. Number 1 on this list is the Book of Soya. The Book of Soya is one of the most complete collections of magic and dark magic that one could come across. Wikipedia writes, amongst the incantations and instructions on magic, astrology, demonology, lists of conjunctions, lunar mansions, and names of genealogies of angels, the book contains 36 large squares of letters which Dee was unable to decipher. Otherwise unknown medieval magical treatises are cited, including works known as the Liber E, Liber Os, Liber Dignus, Liber Sipil, and Liber Munob. So we'll get to those letters in a second because those play into the cursed nature of this book, but even without those, we're still dealing with a book that goes into depth on some pretty dangerous topics. The one that jumps off the page to me as being potentially problematic is demonology, the study of demons and the hierarchy to them. and also the study of how to potentially summon them. This is certainly problematic and already a reason to not read this book, but let's get back to those letters. In 1608, there lived a man named John Dee. John Dee was fascinated with this book and wanted to figure out how to decode the letters. He reached out to the angel Uriel, and Uriel told him that only the worthy one will be able to crack the code. Truly a chosen one scenario where the book will reveal its secrets to the one that it decides. John Dee tried to decode it anyways, but then a grim fate befell him and he died. Then, very mysteriously, the book disappeared from the face of the earth for almost 400 years, until it all of a sudden reappeared in 1994. Now, it's thought that trying to decode these letters could prove fatal if you aren't the one worthy to do so. There's over 7 billion people on the planet, so the odds that you're the one worthy one and won't die are pretty slim. Not the sort of odds that I'd want to take just to look at some strange medieval letters. Number 5 on this list is Shams al-Marif. This book, from my findings, is not inherently evil in its teachings, but is one of those examples of potentially being a bit too much power for one person to possess. It's a 13th century Arabic grimoire written by Ahmed al-Buni. The book attempts to teach its readers how to perform ancient Arabic magic and is very spiritualistic. This book was super influential in Arabic culture and gained a large following. Many good things have come from this book, but also when you have a large amount of people following anything, some take it too far. Wikipedia writes, in contemporary form, the book consists of 2 volumes, Shams al-Marif al-Kubra and Shams al-Marif al-Sugra, the former being the larger of the 2. The first few chapters introduce the reader to magic squares and the combination of numbers and the alphabet that are believed to bring magical effect, which the author insists is the only way to communicate with jinn, angels, and spirits. And that right there is one of the main teachings in this book, the ability to talk to spirits. The amount of scary stories that we've talked about on this channel though, in regards to people trying to communicate with the dead is crazy, and it shows just how often things like this can go wrong. This has obviously happened many a time with this book, and those trying to reach their departed loved one end up contacting a super dangerous demon. I don't think that there's anything morally wrong with contacting the dead, if the dead are okay with it of course, but it seems like doing this always ends up with something bad happening. This grimoire won't curse you just by simply reading it, but if you try and perform some of the rituals it suggests, then it's very likely that you could cause some serious harm to you or those that you love. I recommend just avoiding this book altogether. Number 4 on this list is Devarmi Mystery. Now the book in question here is actually a fictional book, and therefore it would be actually impossible for you to read it anyways, even if you wanted to for some reason. But that being said, it doesn't change the fact that it's definitely cursed and extremely evil. If this book was real, then we would need to get rid of it as soon as possible because it teaches humans how to do some very dangerous things. The book is part of the Lovecraftian universe and made its first appearance in The Secret of the Tomb. The book isn't referenced too much in that story, but it's described in pretty good detail in the story The Black Bargain. In that book, it describes Devarmi Mystery as something that told you how you could compound aconite and belladonna and draw circles of phosphorescent fire on the floor when the stars were right. Something that spoke of melting tallow candles and blending them with corpse fat, whispered of the uses to which animal sacrifices might be put. It spoke of meetings that could be arranged with various parties most people don't even believe in, with cold, deliberate directions for traffic with ancient evil. Drawing circles of fire, sacrificing animals, talking with ancient evil, this all sounds like pretty bad news to me. Especially the part that says you can arrange meetings with various parties. It's clear that not only can this book teach someone how to perform any number of spells and incantations, but some of those spells will deal with the summoning of ancient demons and creatures. And if we assume that this book is real and can be read, then that would also mean that the terrifyingly powerful gods Lovecraft wrote about would also be real. Meaning that this book could grant you the ability to summon Cthulhu or something even worse. Summoning your standard demon is already bad enough, but an all-knowing, super powerful god definitely raises the stakes a little bit. This book, from every description I can read about, sounds like something that's just far too dangerous for any human to use and wield safely. If it ever was real and you did happen to stumble upon it, best to avoid reading it at all costs.
Next up at number 3, the Grand Grimoire. A text so nefarious and mysterious that most people believe that it's kept deep in the bowels of the Vatican Church's ancient vaulted archives, which, sadly for us, isn't open to the public. While there is no evidence for this, the Grand Grimoire has nevertheless gained notoriety throughout the modern era, with its legend being popularized in the early 20th century. Plain and simple, this grimoire outlines black magic, with different editions dating the book between 1521, 1522 and 1421 respectively, although the most likely versions were written in the early 19th century. The Grand Grimoire is also known as Le Dragon Rouge, or the Red Dragon, and is later divided into two sections: the Sanctum Regnum, which outlines the instructions for making a pact with a demon and commanding the spirit through the means of a blasting rod into doing the reader's bidding, including instructions to make a pact with the devil. The second part is known as Le Secret Magique ou le Grand Art de Pouvoir Parler aux Morts, which is the secret of the Byzantine Empire, to be specific. Also known by its more lofty name, the Little Key of the whole art of hygromancy, found by several craftsmen and by the Holy Prophet Solomon, which, you know, if you're going to name something, you may as well name it in full. This grimoire is literally the cornerstone of every grimoire ever made, and serves as the bridge between the Roman era Testament of Solomon and the Renaissance Key of Solomon, where the mystical era of demonology made its return. Allegedly, it was based upon the found scripture of King Solomon, laying out his knowledge to his son Rehoboam, and it is pretty much a guidebook on a vast amount of magical techniques and tools to summon and control a host of demonic spirits, create charms, understand the differing means of divination, and heal through the powerful use of herbalism. Whatever your thoughts, there's no doubt that the magical treatise of Solomon had a massive influence on everything from folklore and witchcraft to horror cinema, and even Harry Potter, and whatever it is, it makes for a bloody interesting story. It actually translates to the aim of the sage or the goal of the wise. It wasn't until 1256 when it was translated into Spanish by Alfonso X of Castile, and later into Latin, where it picked up the name Picatrix. The book synthesizes ancient works of magic with astrology and outlines a practice known as talismanic magic, a celestial power that allegedly draws on the cosmic will of the universe. It also draws on the Neoplatic theory of hypostasis, which essentially is the idea that there's always a bigger fish, and it may or may not be a demon.
Number 3, the Grand Grimoire. That is so fun to say. This next entry has been nicknamed the Gospel of Satan. So if you're looking for an indication as to whether or not this book is, you know, evil, there you go. They had to put that on a sticker, put it on the cover right next to the Oprah's Book Club recommendation. This book is said to have originally been written by a man possessed by the devil sometime in the 16th century. It's an infamous occult text and is said to contain dark incantations, spells and rituals, tools on how to force demons to do one's bidding, and even some instructions for a little necromancy 101 for fledgling dead raisers. It's not all brimstone and hellfire though. There are also reports on how to make pacts with spirits for personal gain, rituals to win the lottery, talk to ghosts, make yourself invisible, and even adorably, how to win love. Never heard of a demon working to help someone fall in love. Now all that sounds cool, definitely. I know I would love to have like a little skeleton minion who could help me with chores, maybe be like my little buddy. I love playing a Necromancer in Skyrim, but these things don't really work out if you don't know what you're doing. Take a look at Full Metal Alchemist, you know, that didn't work, they didn't know what they were doing. Even opening this book is considered equivalent to selling your soul to the devil. Soon as you crack the spine, it's like signing the contract. Because of the book's nefarious reputation, the original copy of the manuscript has been sealed away inside the Vatican's secret archives, and not currently available to the public. So I don't think whatever they're listing on Amazon as the Grand Grimoire for $10 is the real Grand Grimoire. Number 2, the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript has got to be one of my favorite stories of a mysterious manuscript like ever. I guess that's why I put it at number 2. Unlike a lot of entries on this list, it's actually very easy to come across a digital copy of the Voynich manuscript. It's available to read online. The only trouble is reading it honestly probably won't do you a lick of good, since it's written in a language no one has ever heard of and there's no record of it ever having existed. Yale University has the entire thing up and available online if you're feeling confident enough that you can take a crack at it and feel like banging your head against a brick wall for a few hours. The book is a handwritten, hand-illustrated codex of 240 pages of pure mystery, featuring gorgeous illustrations and typography, and what the book is about is your guess is as good as mine, honestly. Carbon dating suggests that it stems from the 15th century, and analysis of the style of the text and illustrations within suggests that it could have been penned during the Italian Renaissance. But just about every single aspect of this thing is shrouded in mystery. We don't even know what it's truthfully called. The Voynich manuscript is the name it was given after the initial owner, Wilfrid Voynich, purchased it in 1912 and brought it to public attention for the first time. Sorry, not the first owner, I'm sure several other people owned it before him. As such, the language inside the book is occasionally referred to as Voynichese. Now, some pages are missing, lost to time completely, and the pages we do have are just a puzzle. Some are foldable sheets of various sizes, some pages have wondrously drawn diagrams or illustrations showing things like plants, some fictional, some real, and astrological symbols, drawings of people. Over the years, there have been several efforts to try and decode and document the book and figure out just what it is. A prevailing theory, admittedly a boring one, is that it's a guide to botany written in a mysterious script, a forgotten language, an uncrackable code, an incredibly convoluted hoax. Of course, with any good mystery, there are some wild theories. Some say the Voynich manuscript could be written from an extraterrestrial gifted to humanity, or written in demonic script perhaps, or that biblical language that we were mentioning in the Book of Soya a few points ago. Like I said, it's available online, so I leave this up to you. If you manage to crack it, let us know down below in the comments. We're all clamoring for it. And number 1, the Codex Gigas. When it comes to cursed and demonic books, the Codex Gigas is one of the biggest ones around. Like, literally. Codex Gigas translates to giant book, which isn't exactly a scary name. When you see the size of this behemoth, it starts to make a little bit more sense. This thing is massive. 2 feet long. Now, giant oversized illuminated manuscripts were pretty common around the area the book was penned, but this one stood out for its immense size and the dark rumors surrounding the supposedly cursed text. Don't even try reading this thing, just lifting it will give you a hernia. That's the curse. It's occasionally been dubbed Satan's Bible due to the legends surrounding its origin. It's a good story, so get cozy. Supposedly, the legend goes that a monk by the name of Herman the Recluse, which is also what they used to call me, was condemned to death for heresy and was to be walled up alive and starved. In a desperate plea to save himself, Herman tried to convince the prior and the abbot as a whole that if he could pen a manuscript to honor God's glory, and that it would contain all of human knowledge and all of human history in one book, and if he could pen it in one night, he would be let free. The abbot agreed, thinking this was, of course, impossible. Herman wrote until midnight, wearing his fingertips down, and in a moment of desperation, made a prayer to Lucifer and asked for his eternal soul in exchange for the book's completion in order to repent for his sins. I totally get it. You know, I gotta be honest, I have done some pretty nutso stuff trying to make sure my scripts get in time for deadline. Haven't quite sold my soul to the devil yet. I usually just rail Red Bulls, but I'd probably make a similar deal under a similar deadline. Now, I don't want to poke any holes in Herman's logic here, but I will say maybe selling your soul to the devil is part of the reason you got into this mess in the first place, because that does sound a little bit like heresy, but it's not my place to judge. I'm not an archdeacon. A variation of the legend states that Herman worked for years on the manuscript, day and night, but still was unable to complete it in his lifetime and asked for the devil's assistance. Anyway, no matter the story, the legend states that Satan signed the Bible with a particularly terrifying illustration of himself. I mean, take a look at it, it's horrifying looking. The book contains a birth of information. Like they said, it was supposed to be everything humanity had attained up to that point in one big book. These days, the Codex Gigas is preserved in the Natural Museum in Sweden, where you can admire the penmanship of Herman the Recluse and his ghost author, Satan. Number 5, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is an old Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't the initial publication of this book that gave it its notoriety. Instead, it was when it was 19th and 20th century magicians who were in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. But hush hush, you didn't hear that from me. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, S.L.M. Mathers, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a previously established 17th century French translation. Now, Mathers' translation quickly became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley to inspire his system of magic, the legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. That solo still goes, man. Now, there's all kinds of spells and magic inside this text. Some real highlights include spells on how to conjure somebody and turn them into a donkey, how to summon a monkey to do your bidding, that sounds great, and how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The big key point in this text, however, is an epic, multi-month spanning ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their own guardian angel. The book theorizes that everyone has a guardian angel and that they are another part of their essence, a spiritual other half of yourself. The ritual involves, I don't know how to say this politely. You have to, well, they say you have to get blissfully intimate with your other half. Once the honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them. And then they'll be able to master the spirit domain. That sounds like a lot of irredeemed spirits. I hope my angel might help out a little bit with that. This all sounds very complicated, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. Seems like heavy reading, not before bedtime. And if you're looking for more true tales of terror, fake frightening fribs, cursed relics, ancient evils, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, ghouls, goblins, and pretty much everything spooky you can think of, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. Stay subscribed, but way more importantly, stay scared. Okay, let's keep going. Whole lot more video to get through. Number 4. Book of Soya. The Book of Soya, also known by a more complicated name, the Alderia Siva Soya Vocor, is an occult text that hails back from the 15th century. I'm pretty sure just saying that name out loud in front of the camera, I probably caused a curse on the office, so I'm sorry about that. This text would have been lost to time, just another forgotten cursed manuscript, if it weren't for the obsessive efforts of John Dee, a 16th century polymath who had his hands in just about every field of study. Polymath is a fancy word for a guy who studies just about everything, and Dee practiced chemistry, physics, astronomy, and also the occult. You know, there's always more to learn, right? Mr. Dee was particularly interested in contacting angels to learn the secrets of the universe. And this book contains a litany of recipes for magic spells and all sorts of writings on demonology and astrology, but most importantly, and what caught Mr. Dee's attention, is that the book is said to include the names and genealogies of all of heaven's angels. Dee believed that the book contained an ancient divine message written in a language spoken to by Adam, the true unspoiled word of God. That's a pretty big statement. Now, much like the Voynich manuscript, which I'll mention a little later in the video, so put a pin in that for now, it had 36 cryptic tables that remained undeciphered for centuries. Dee attempted at one point to crack the code with the help of a mystic who convinced Dee that he could channel the angels for him. Dee allegedly was so desperate to unlock the contents of this book that when his mystic told him it was part of the ritual that he be allowed a night with John Dee's wife, he agreed. That's the oldest trick in the book, man. The old "I'll let you talk to angels if I can go out with your wife" gamble. Ugh, can't believe you fell for it. Dee's wife would end up birthing a son, Theodore Dee, the fatherhood of which was disputed, to say the least. John Dee was never able to crack the code in his lifetime and decipher the Book of Soya, and perhaps for the best, as it was said he was warned that man was never meant to uncover those secrets, and that knowledge would end his life. The book is now said to reside in the British Library, although digital copies are available. Read it at your own risk, and if somebody says they can translate it for you, just make sure you really read everything on the fine print in the contract before you sign that, okay? Just looking out for you.
Number 3 on this list is the Prophecies by Nostradamus. We've talked a decent amount about Nostradamus on this channel before. If you missed those videos and you don't know who he is, then Nostradamus was a French astrologer and seer. He lived from 1503 to 1566, and we still talk about him today because of his work called the Prophecies. The Prophecies is a collection of poetic quatrains which are short poems of only 4 lines. He made 942 of them and called the book the Prophecies because that's exactly what these poems are, prophecies. Through these prophecies, Nostradamus is credited with having predicted the use of nuclear weapons, the rises of Napoleon and Adolf Hitler, the death of Princess Diana, the attacks on the World Trade Center, and that's just to name a few. The reason that I'm including this in this video about having to pray before we use it is because we've got to hope that Nostradamus was wrong. A lot of the predictions that he's made for the coming years, they're extremely detrimental to human life and the planet as we know it. For instance, in 2022, a few of the grim predictions Nostradamus has is that Paris will become under siege, Japan will get hit with a record-breaking earthquake leaving thousands dead, and the entire planet will enter a war based off of climate change. That's only a small selection of the predictions this guy has going on for the coming year, and they don't sound too appealing to me. If you ever were to read the prophecies in its entirety, then just pray that this book isn't haunted with the truth. Number 2 on this list is The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is one of the most famous novels written in the last decade. However, some of its fame comes from a very dark and evil place. The Catcher in the Rye has been linked to many murders over the years. It is said to be the favorite of a large group of criminals who believe that the book is speaking to them. Many people think that this has to do with the main character, Holden Caulfield, who feels like an outcast and doesn't fit in anywhere. One can imagine that this may be the same sort of feelings that a criminal would feel when they go through their adolescence, which is what Holden is going through in the book. Hundreds of crimes have been linked to this story, but the most infamous is the murder of John Lennon. Mark David Chapman, a lover of The Catcher in the Rye and a deep admirer of John Lennon, assassinated the musician on December 8th, 1980. It said that he believed he was saving Lennon's soul from the evil in the world and was preserving his innocence to live on. This could be a whole bunch of baloney though, because he's also said that he was jealous of the Beatle and wanted glory for himself. Whatever his true motives were, right after he fatally shot John Lennon, he pulled out a copy of The Catcher in the Rye and read it until the police showed up and apprehended him. Reading this book may not inherently make you an evil individual, but hundreds of crimes like this have been linked to this book, and it does certainly seem to pull at the nasty feelings that live inside of us. If you are going to read it, you may just want to say a prayer before doing so. Number 1 on this list is the Satanic Bible. The Satanic Bible was written by Anton LaVey in 1969, and it has been described as one of the most influential pieces of writing to impact modern day Satanism. The book is exactly as the title would suggest. It's a collection of essays, stories, and rituals with the main purpose of praising and worshipping Satan. Satanists regard this text as being an authoritative text, and for many of them it's reached scriptural status. Many cults have been based around this text, dark rituals have been associated to it, and it's been known to incite chaos. In fact, because of the devilish instances that have been associated with it, there have been many times where libraries, schools, and even prisons have banned the book from being there. This book is fully evil in nature and goes into deep detail about how to truly become one with the devil. It may not be haunted by one specific ghostly presence, but one can make the argument that it is haunted by Satan himself. The content is so demonic in nature and it has become such a successful read that it can be linked to hundreds of deaths over the years. These include ritualistic sacrifices, murders, and suicides. If you ever were to read this book, then I would recommend praying beforehand to avoid falling into a deep and somber rabbit hole. I'm sure that reading the book would be an interesting intellectual study, but surrounding yourself with that much darkness, it isn't healthy for the human mind. Number 5 on this list is the Picatrix. The Picatrix is a large grimoire compiled of all Arabic magic. The content associated with this book is so abhorrently graphic though that it's often avoided by people who study such books. The book lives in the world of astrology and tells its reader that their magical abilities will be powered by the stars. In the book, you can be able to hone the power of planets like Saturn and Jupiter and use that power to your liking. Typically, the spells in this book, though, are of an evil nature. The spell that follows is about creating a wasteland for you to live in. On the day and hour of Saturn, with the second face of Capricorn ascending with Saturn standing in it, place the thin sheet in the place that you desire to be depopulated. The harmful power of Saturn will flow into it and it will never be populated for as long as the thin sheet shall stand there. The spell there doesn't even explain that you need to coat this thin sheet that you're using with fluid from a pig's brain for it to work. However, it's grotesque spells like this that have many experts avoiding this book at all costs. The book is filled with rituals and spells that are just plain wrong, and honestly, I don't know if even praying beforehand is enough to read this book. I just avoid it at all costs. Number 4 on this list is Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 is a book that was written by Ray Bradbury that was published in 1953. The book is all about a dystopian United States where books are completely outlawed, and if anyone is to read a book, then these people called firemen will attack your home and burn it to the ground, all of your belongings as well. The book has actually received some pretty exceptional reviews and is a pretty unique take on a dystopian world. Unlike some of the other entries on this list and in our past parts, there's nothing inherently evil about the words in this book. It won't teach you how to praise the devil, and reading it won't curse you or make you susceptible to demonic possession. However, reading one version of the book that was published might do far worse. Reading that version might kill you. Asbestos is a mineral that can be turned into a chemical used to make something fireproof. Well, back in 1953 when this book was published, the company that published it thought that a really cool gimmick would be to coat the entire book in asbestos when they were binding it. The idea being that these fictional firemen would have no way of burning it even if they wanted to. Although this was a really interesting promotional effort and the sales of the book did pretty well, nobody was aware at that time of the serious effect that extended exposure to asbestos can have on somebody. Asbestosis is a chronic lung disease caused by inhaling asbestos fibers. This causes shortness of breath and a much higher possibility that you get lung cancer. A lot of miners, railroad workers, electricians, they can be susceptible to this disease, or in this case, people who purchased the first publication of Fahrenheit 451. Now, the negative effects of this chemical won't show up for potentially a decade, and it does take some serious extended exposure. However, some people have claimed that the purchasing of this book caused them long-term effects later in life. If you bought this thing and then put it on your bookshelf to sit for years, then you could be inhaling this chemical for years without even realizing it. I suppose this book wouldn't fall under the conventional definition of being haunted, but I certainly wouldn't want to be reading it if I was you. Number 3 on this list is Tomino's Hell. Tomino's Hell is one of the most famous works from the Japanese poet Sajo Yaso, but it's famous for all the wrong reasons. It's not actually a book, so I'm leaving the parameters of this video a little bit, but it is a one-page poem that has dire consequences if read aloud. It was initially released in 1919 and started to gain some popularity because those who read it felt very troubled and uneasy when doing so. The poem's subject matter is very disturbing and graphic, and it's understandable why it would make somebody feel uneasy. It's about a child named Tomino who lived amongst abusive parents and decided to write all of her sorrows into a poem. That poem is found by her parents and they respond by locking her up in a cage and not feeding her. Eventually she dies from disease and malnourishment. So the poem itself is pretty bloody depressing to begin with. Throw on the fact that when you read it out loud you actually get cursed, and now we have one of the most dangerous pieces of writing in the world. Tomino's Hell, if you read out the poem in its entirety out loud, is said to curse you forever. The curse ranges in severity and can come in the form of almost anything. Illness, financial ruin, accidents, death of a loved one, or even death of yourself are all in the potential cards for what might happen if you read this poem out loud. One of the most famous instances of this is filmmaker Suji Terayama, who made a movie based on the poem and then shortly died soon afterwards due to illness. There have been countless others who have suffered similar fates after reading this poem as well. I've actually avoided reading the poem even silently while I was doing this entry and just read people's descriptions on it. For your safety and your family's safety, I recommend that you avoid it as well. Number 2 on this list is Codex Gigas. This book is often referred to as the Devil's Bible, and anything that's called that has to make this list. It's one of the strangest books in the world because even though it's only 320 pages in length, it actually weighs roughly 160 pounds. The origin behind this dark book is widely debated, but the most popular legend includes a Buddhist monk. It's said that in the 16th century, a Buddhist monk broke a promise to his master, and as a punishment, he chose to lock himself in a room and have no food or no water. He spent days in that room writing 310 of the current 320 pages in the book. The last 10 he couldn't finish though, and instead of enlisting the help of someone from our world, he decided to get someone else to help. It was the devil. He called to Lucifer himself, and Lucifer answered his call. The monk died, but Lucifer finished the remaining 10 pages and left his devilish mark on the book forever. The book is now locked up in Vatican City for safekeeping, but it's said that somebody stole those last 10 pages written by the devil, and nobody knows where they are now. What's written in those last 10 pages is also a bit of a mystery. The devil could have written horrible spells in there that could result in awful evil sweeping across the land. He may have also put a curse on those last 10 pages, and those who read it will fall victim to whatever curse he decided to leave behind. Who knows how dangerous this book could actually be? Either way, if you ever stumble upon Codex Gigas, I don't recommend giving it a read. Number 1 on this list is the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is considered by some to be the most dangerous book on the planet. The exact date this book was written is unknown, with some estimates putting its first publication in the early 1400s, but other experts saying that it was probably written some 500 years after that. The writer of this book is thought to be Antonio del Rabina, who, other than writing this grimoire, pretty much a complete mystery. The Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon are often on people's most cursed books list, and much of the teachings in the Grand Grimoire was taken taken from those original texts. This book, the Grand Grimoire, serves only one evil purpose. It teaches someone how to summon and make a pact with the devil. Wikipedia writes, the work is divided into 2 books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is further divided into 2 parts, the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets. The Sanctum Regnum contain instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required in book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contain simpler spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual in the first book. Some editions contain a short text between those 2 parts dealing with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning the lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, or making oneself invisible. This book is made to be an evil cheat code to life, something that somebody can use to hack the game and get a leg up at everything. And don't get me wrong, winning the lottery would be a pretty cool superpower to have, but at what cost? How much of my soul am I gonna have to sell to a demon to get that done? How do I know that I'm gonna perform these spells properly? Like, if I'm an amateur, then I could very easily screw something up and fatally injure myself in the process. Also, summoning the devil is never the best idea to begin with either. This book is just far too powerful and far too sinister for humans to have access to. Number 5 on this list is Longlost Friend. This book is really interesting because even though there are multiple copies around the world, there's only one particular copy that has a serious curse to it. The book itself was written in 1820 by John George Homan and is basically a collection of spells and other folk remedies that would be very useful if you were running a farm. A lot of the content in the book has to do with healing livestock and casting a spell to have better yields come the harvest. One copy of this book, though, was pretty much directly responsible for the murder of its owner. Euron Grey writes, while the book itself is intended to be benign, containing as it does wonderful and well-tested remedies and arts for men as well for livestock according to its original German title, the tome took on a rather sinister reputation following the so-called Hex Hollow murder committed by John Blymer, John Curry, and Wilbert Hess. The 3 men broke into the home of their neighbor Nelson Raymer because they said he'd put a curse on them and they were trying to find his copy of the Long-Lost Friend and destroy it in order to end their affliction. Unable to do so, they instead killed Raymer and attempted to burn down his house. Raymer's supposed copy of the book never turned up. After this incident had happened, the men sort of came to their senses and it felt to them as if they'd been under a spell and lost their minds for a little while. People have theorized that the single copy of the Long-Lost Friend that Nelson Raymer had owned was cursed, and through its curse had basically set this tragic event in motion. Similar to the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, after it sabotaged its owner, it went into hiding and now no one knows where this book went. Hopefully it stays hidden and the curse it holds is never brought to the light again. Number 4 on this list is the Orphan story. The Orphan story is one of the few entries on this list where the subject matter isn't too demonic or troubling in nature. It's, as the title would suggest, a story about an orphan who at 14 years old leaves Spain to go on some adventures. The curse with this book seems to be when someone studies it. The story was written by Martin de Leon Cardenas in the early 1600s and since then has racked up the death toll for those who've worked on the book. A Peruvian academic, Belinda Palacios, has said, "I laughed it off, but I was a bit apprehensive at the same time. It's taken a while because the people who've worked on it have died, one from a strange disease, one in a car accident, and another of something else. A book that if you spend extensive time with it will inevitably lead to your death. No one knows where this curse originally started from. Potentially the author had written something into the book where if somebody spends a long time with the work, they'll eventually suffer a grim fate. Or potentially through the years of its publication, the book has had something sinister happen to it that then caused those who worked on it to suffer greatly. I find it very interesting that this curse only seems to apply to those that study or put great effort into the book. From what I've read, those who just simply read the book for pleasure will be fine. That being said, any book that has the potential to curse me with death is something that I'd like to keep off my reading list.
Coming in at 3, The Green Man, Kingsley Amis. Published back in 1969 by British author Kingsley Amis, The Green Man is often described as being 3 genres of novel in one: ghost story, moral fable, and comic novel. It is essentially a pastiche of a Jameson ghost story by a hardcore fan. The story follows Maurice Allingston, a man who has reached middle age and is haunted by death. It opens with Maurice's father dropping dead and continues as friends and family convene for the funeral. Now his problems are many and increasing throughout the story. How to deal with his own declining health, how to reach out to a teenage daughter who watches TV all the time, how to find another drink, and then of course, death. It's a ghost story but also a black comedy. It's confusing, yes, but also one of the best books on our list, and certainly worthy of your attention if you dare. Coming in at 2, The Ritual, Adam Neville. If you're familiar at all with the Netflix film of the same name, you'll be surprised to see this on our list, and so high. Now that's not me diminishing the film in any way, but once again I'm straying from the popular and focusing on the unknown. Now The Ritual of course gained notoriety after the release of the film, but prior to that it was a hidden horror gem. The book follows 4 old university friends as they set off into the Scandinavian wilderness of the Arctic Circle in an attempt to reconnect with one another and escape their problems. However, tensions begin to arise within the group, and with little experience between them, a shortcut during their hike turns into a nightmare scenario that could cost them all of their lives. Things descend into madness when the group stumbles across an old habitation. Ancient artifacts decorating the wall and bones scattered upon the floor. It's haunting, and the last quarter of the book departs radically from what happened leading up to it, and the ending does not arrive until the final sentence of the book. It's chilling and just downright perfect. And finally, coming in at number 1, The Beckoning Fair One, Oliver Onions. Oliver Onions is among the greatest practitioners of the traditional English ghost story in the Silver Age. What tells these stories apart from more recent horrors is that they are not crude, they are slow and subtle. The Beckoning Fair One tells the story of a young down-and-out novelist who leases rooms in a decaying house, in the hopes of completing his masterpiece. However, as all classic ghost stories go, he discovers that he is not alone. But what makes this story truly frightening is that he is happy about it. Now, much like our previous numbers, The Beckoning Fair One is a little tricky to track down, but the best way to obtain it is by purchasing a copy of Anita Miller's anthology, 4 Classic Ghostly Tales, in which it appears alongside other masterpieces. Coming in at 5, The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson. Now you may be surprised I included this book on our list, considering it jumped up in popularity following the release of the Netflix series of the same name. However, prior to this the book wasn't as popular amongst all audiences, and was a lesser known ghost story that certainly deserves our attention. When we think about horror story cliches, we think haunted houses. It's the top of the list, an idea done so often it's frequently parodied. However, Shirley Jackson brought something entirely new with her book, The Haunting of Hill House, which is simply the best haunted house story ever written to date. Fact. Released back in 1959, Hill House is a gothic horror that tells the story of 4 seekers who arrive at a notoriously haunted house, under the order of Dr. Montague, an occult scholar looking for evidence of a haunting. At first their stay seems destined to be nothing but a spooky encounter. However, Hill House is gathering its power and eventually chooses one of them to make its own. Guess who? It's an easy guess. Now, the book is vastly different to the show and arguably better, so if you want a fright, you should definitely check it out, even though this list is books you should avoid. But where's the fun in that? Coming in at 4, The Cipher, Kathy Koja. First published back in 1991 by Kathy Koja during a period of time where it was becoming clear that the likes of Stephen King weren't the future of horror fiction. So Koja took advantage of this by stripping the genre down to the basics. The Cipher tells the story of a black hole that spontaneously appears in the floor of a couple's apartment in Detroit. And of course, dreadful things begin to happen. Nicholas and Nakota are forced to set out to see what happens when they drop various items into the hole. But as they do, they discover everything they drop down comes back violently rearranged. Now this book is a tough one to track down these days, but the only way to get a hold of it is in ebook form, which is no fun at all. Here's hoping that publisher will eventually bring it back into print. They would be doing us all an invaluable service.
Next up at number 3, Euron Greyjoy. And please, no, don't panic, I'm not talking about the show's representation of Euron Greyjoy, but purely the book series. Although I still love the show for the most part, Euron Greyjoy wasn't given the portrayal that his character deserved, and there's no denying that in George Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, the Crow's Eye himself, Euron Greyjoy, is one of the most terrifying villains in the whole of modern fantasy. And again, it's because of his humanity, or lack thereof. Now, George Martin is one of the finest writers of our time and has a particular knack for creating characters of pure evil, down to the fact that he segues the conventional notions of light and dark and instead focuses on areas of grey. But no, Not for Euron. Euron Greyjoy is just straight up the most truly evil inhabitant of the known world. Just compare him to some of the most memorable villains of the entire series, so far anyway, and they all pale in comparison to Euron. Ramsay Bolton, Tywin Lannister, Joffrey, all of them various shades of villainy, cruelty and malice that have all equally committed some of the most violent and horrifying atrocities in the series, and Euron still takes the cake. You see, he's not a psychopath in the conventional sense. He's not prone to violent bursts of anger by impulse alone, but maintains his own entirely calculated sense of chaos without once showing us the true rage that lies within him, and believe me, there's plenty of it. Take for example how Euron Greyjoy calmly ripped out the tongues of his entire crew after a storm took his ship by surprise. He ripped out every single crew member's tongue without a second thought, and his reason was that he needed silence. Allegedly, anyway. Because as we all know, it's pretty difficult to stage a mutiny without a tongue. And that isn't even close to the worst of it, because the true evil of Euron's character is explicitly revealed throughout allusions to his childhood, pitting reason as to why his brothers despise him with such hatred. You see, the Greyjoys are pirates, reavers and pillagers who take what they want in pursuit of riches untold. But Euron, despite having sailed pretty much across the entire known world, collecting countless treasures along the way and becoming the most successful Iron Islander of all time, he keeps none of it for himself. Euron isn't in it for the plunder. Perhaps then his violent nature would make sense. He's in it for something else entirely. What that something is, only he'll ever know, and that's the terrifying part. Swinging in at number 2, Nurse Ratched. And this particular entry may get people's blood boiling a little, because there's no denying the fact that Louise Fletcher's performance in 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest caused an entire generation to scream out in rage at the screen, as her fantastic portrayal of Nurse Ratched relentlessly proved that there are few limits to the depths that absolute power can corrupt absolutely. And although Fletcher's performance was without a doubt iconic in its own right, that's not to detract from the fact that Ken Kesey's 1962 novel just so happened to pen one of the most terrifying villains in the whole of literature. And again, it was down to her warped sense of humanity, or lack thereof, where the true nature of evil was found. However, the tragedy of Ratched's character only serves to make us as an audience question our own sense of morality, and ultimately it forces us to confront whether we can or should ever forgive evil. I'll try my utmost not to spoil anything behind this tale in particular, but as the novel explains, Nurse Ratched is the head administrative nurse at Salem State Hospital, a mental institution where the novel's narrator, Chief Brodom, resides alongside the iconic Randall McMurphy and a whole host of other patients that make up the fabric of Kesey's tragic tale. At Salem State, Nurse Ratched exercises her absolute power over the patients, using her patients' access to medication and basic necessities as a means to malevolently maintain a corrupt, cruel, authoritarian regime over some of the most vulnerable members of our society. I mean, revealing the true nature of Nurse Ratched's pure propensity for evil would be spoilers enough, but holy moly, believe me when I say this character is a creation of true evil. Whether we can understand her motivations is a different question entirely, but Nurse Ratched remains to be one of the most perverse demonstrations of authority and the evil that so often comes with it. Yeah, she definitely deserves a place on this list. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Hannibal Lecter. And that should be Dr. Hannibal Lecter, because I'm not in the mood to piss off one of the most complex and dangerous minds in the entirety of fiction. Some would argue that in fact Hannibal Lecter is the most perfect villain ever created, and that's without being in many cases the actual villain of his story. Created by Thomas Harris and first appearing in his 1981 novel Red Dragon, Hannibal Lecter is a forensic psychiatrist on one side and a cannibalistic serial killer on the other. Throughout the events of Red Dragon, the novel's protagonist Will Graham comes to the stark understanding that Dr. Lecter doesn't fit any conventional psychological profile. In fact, psychiatrists refer to him as a sociopath simply because they don't know what else to call him. A fact which is reinforced in the later novels, where Clarice Starling states that they don't have a name for what he is. In many ways though, Hannibal Lecter is the antithesis of what a human should be. He operates more as a machine than he does a man, demonstrated through his unrivaled intelligence and his eidetic memory, where he often explains the details of his elaborate memory palace, a narrative function that is often paired to a similar brilliant mind, Sherlock Holmes. That makes you think, right? However, despite his superior intellect, it comes with the extent and variability of his actions where the fear truly lies. Much like Euron Greyjoy, Hannibal Lecter is a pool of such depth and complexity that the understanding of his motivations would or will perhaps never be reached by the rest of humanity. And that's where the true brilliance of Harris's creation truly shines, because as portrayed in the novels and the later films with the legendary performance of Sir Anthony Hopkins, we as an audience find Lecter to be a likeable character. He's a cannibal, he eats people with fava beans and a nice Chianti, and yet we can't help but finding ourselves liking this guy. He's more akin to the likes of Frankenstein's monster or Dracula. He's a creation of horror that can only serve to go along with their nature, and strangely enough, for a human looking in, that fact forms a bizarre thread of curiosity that draws us in. Hannibal Lecter is the definition of horror, equal parts fear, equal parts curiosity, and he's a mystery that we'll never truly understand. Kicking off at number 5, Mrs. Coulter. And if you haven't read Philip Pullman's fantastic series, His Dark Materials, I highly suggest that you do. But in a tale that literally pits the eternal forces of evil against the eternal forces of good, the terrifying Mrs. Coulter remains to be one of the most violent, selfish, and memorable villains of recent times. And although Nicole Kidman's performance in the widely disappointing 2007 movie was actually incredibly fitting for her character, I'm talking purely about the novels in this particular instance, because, yeah, the less said about that movie, the better, really. And it's an interesting one because if you know nothing about the novels, Pullman's His Dark Materials is a young adult trilogy that covers some incredibly weighty themes, but it's in the later implication of Mrs. Coulter's actions where the true consequences of her villainy were finally revealed. Although that's definitely not to say that throughout the story she's not the literal definition of evil wrapped up in an aesthetically pleasing package, because that's exactly what she is. Now, I'll try my hardest not to spoil the character of Mrs. Coulter, but perhaps the best way to describe the nature of her evil is with her demon. You see, in the world of His Dark Materials, people are explicitly connected to a creature that serves as a physical manifestation of their human soul, which appears as various kinds of creatures from the animal kingdom. In this instance, Mrs. Coulter's demon was a male golden monkey that on the surface appeared to be a beautiful, curious creature, and alongside his human familiar, the two of them would entice and flatter adults and children alike whilst working for the General Oblation Board, the secret arm of the Magisterium, a corrupt holy church. Like I said, weighty. Her demon perfectly reflected Mrs. Coulter's personality as a beautiful creature on the surface, but running deep with malevolent intentions. On one occasion, her demon was seen tearing the wings off of cave bats out of sheer boredom. Yeah, that says a lot. Coming in at number 4, O'Brien. And this particular fictional creation comes from George Orwell's resounding and highly important novel, 1984. And yeah, it's going to be incredibly difficult to explain the evil behind this character in particular without spoiling the novel. But hey, Orwell published this book 70 years ago in 1949, so I think you've had fair warning. In the world of 1984, the protagonist, Winston Smith, lives in a dystopian, oppressive, totalitarian version of Britain, a portion of the superstate of Oceania, which has been under the rule of Ingsoc and Big Brother for time long forgotten. He who controls the past controls the future, and all that. In the society, nothing is safe from the eternal gaze of Big Brother, and even the confines of the human mind aren't safe from the Thought Police, an organisation that serves as the secret, ever-watchful eye of Ingsoc. And that's where O'Brien steps in, an administrator that works in the Ministry of Truth and who leads Winston Smith to believe that he is secretly leading an underground resistance known as the Brotherhood to bring down Ingsoc from within and overthrow the party. In actual fact though, as is revealed in a vital moment of realization in the novel, this whole thing is just a game to O'Brien, and he in fact finds great joy weeding out citizens that aren't completely loyal to the party and to Ingsoc. O'Brien's entire method of operation is to lure in anyone who even questions the party's authority by pretending to be on their side and buy into their model of rebellion, and then of course instead arrest them and cure them through moments of perverse torture of the human mind. I mean, compared to some entries on this list, O'Brien is the definition of a very human fear. He exemplifies totalitarian authority with every morsel of hope that he extinguishes. In his own words, if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. Yeah, although perhaps not the root of all villainy, this guy comes pretty close.
Number 3, Annabelle. The most famous item in the Warrens' occult museum is of course Annabelle. She has featured in the Conjuring films, as well as a few movies of her own, and has made people really think twice about buying any dolls secondhand. According to the Warrens, the doll, who in real life is a simple Raggedy Ann doll, not a creepy looking toy like in the movie that no child in their right mind would ever play with, was given to a nursing student in 1970 by her mother. The doll began exhibiting strange behavior, and the nurse and her roommate contacted a medium who said that the doll was being possessed by the spirit of a woman named Annabelle Higgins. The two took pity on the spirit and allowed it to stay in the doll. The doll began escalating its scary behavior. They threw the doll away, but it somehow appeared in their apartment again, leaving threatening notes. The two contacted the Warrens, who told them that Annabelle was really a demon. The Warrens took the doll away and made it the centerpiece of their museum. Of course, there is no documentation of any of this, and we have to just take the Warrens' word on it. However, skeptics eventually noticed that the story of the doll was very similar to an episode of The Twilight Zone that had aired 7 years before. In episode number 126, The Living Doll, a little girl is given a doll by her mother, Annabelle. The girl's stepfather doesn't like the doll, who, when wound up, begins talking to him, telling him that she doesn't like him. Thinking it is a manufacturer's defect, he throws the doll out, but the doll soon reappears and starts leaving him threatening messages, until eventually tripping him on the stairs and killing him. The similarities are enough that many doubt the validity of the stories the Warrens have told about Annabelle. Is this an example of the Warrens stealing a story from TV? Or an example of life imitating art in a way that is both terrifying and disturbing, and that could never happen anywhere else but the Twilight Zone? Number 2. The Haunting in Connecticut. In the late 1980s, Carmen and Alan Snedeker and their 5 daughters and 2 nieces moved into a home in Southington, Connecticut, as their oldest son was suffering from Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they wanted to be closer to his doctors. The home that they rented turned out to be a former funeral home, which made the family a bit on edge, but they chose to stay regardless, as it was difficult to find an affordable home for such a large family. Things began getting strange, with objects disappearing, and the children reportedly seeing a man with long black hair around the house. The eldest son began exhibiting strange and violent behavior, and doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia. His parents decided to consult Ed and Lorraine. They spent weeks in the house to get the full demonic experience and declared that the home was filled with great evil because the morticians who had worked in the home had been practicing necromancy. They performed an exorcism, and things more or less returned to normal. The story would eventually be adapted into the Haunting in Connecticut film, and the Warrens published a book detailing the case called In a Dark Place, which was written by them with the help of horror novelist Ray Garton, who was hired to interview the Snedekers and shape their testimony into a narrative. When the various family members' stories began to conflict with each other, Ray talked to Ed Warren about his concerns, and Ed responded by saying, "Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story. Just use what works, just make it up, and make it scary." Due to this, the entire case has become laced in controversy in the years since, with Garton distancing himself from his involvement with the supposedly non-fiction book. Number 1. The Happy Christian Family. The Warrens made a point of portraying themselves as a perfect, loving couple who supported each other while using their supposed gifts to help people who were in trouble and spread the message of God. This carries over into the Conjuring films that were inspired by their lives, with both critics and fans consistently bringing up their relationship as a highlight of the films, with it often being called one of the best love stories of the horror genre. But in real life, they were not quite the shining example of God's perfect couple that they would have you believe. Lorraine Warren had a very large role in shaping how her and her late husband were portrayed on film, with some very specific demands written into her contract. Frankly, a little too specific. Her contract with Warner Brothers explicitly states that neither Ed or Lorraine Warren could be depicted engaging in a physical relationship with in the Conjuring series. Furthermore, neither the husband or wife could be depicted as participating in an extramarital relationship. But why these extremely specific demands? Well, in 2017, a woman named Judith Penny came forward, saying that when she was 15 and Ed Warren was in his 30s, Ed began a physical relationship with her and moved her into his and Lorraine's home, with his wife's knowledge. When Judith became pregnant with Ed's baby, Lorraine, the supposed staunch Catholic, was the one who persuaded her to terminate the pregnancy to avoid a scandal that would ruin the Warrens' careers. As if that weren't bad enough, Judith claims that while living with the couple, they would argue constantly, with the fight often getting physically violent, with Ed routinely attacking Lorraine into unconsciousness. Not exactly the perfect couple that they claimed to be. Number 5. Union Cemetery. In Weston, Connecticut, there is a cemetery that many paranormal investigators and enthusiasts claim is one of the most haunted locations in the entire state. As legend goes, many years ago, a man was driving down the road when a woman suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. The driver didn't have time to stop or slow down and struck the woman, but when he pulled over to try and help the woman, she was nowhere to be seen. Since then, several people have reported seeing the woman in white wandering around the cemetery grounds. Some believe she is a woman who lost her son and is still searching for him, while others believe she may have been a jilted bride who took her own life. Either way, it is a local legend that draws a lot of visitors to the town. Oddly enough, this cemetery is just down the road from the home of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they claimed to have spent a large amount of time trying to find evidence of the White Lady. In 1990, Ed claimed that while he was staying overnight in the cemetery, he saw the bride. As he described it, "I heard a woman weeping, and I looked out and saw hundreds of ghost lights floating around and forming into the figure of a woman. I couldn't make out facial features." He claimed that he did manage to capture this encounter on video, however. This is of course very exciting, as definitive proof of paranormal activity is rare and could completely change the way people view their own mortality. When asked to show the footage that would validate his claims, Ed said, "No. This is the incident that is least clearly a lie out of all of them on this list, but it is typical behavior from the Warrens, who claimed that they had proof that they then simply refused to show to anyone all the way up until their deaths." Oddly enough, the ghosts of the Warrens sometimes pass through the dark dimension and visit me. I even have a recording of it on my phone that proves I'm telling the truth. You can't see it though. You'll just have to take my word for it. Number 4. The Amityville Case. Perhaps the most infamous case the Warrens ever came into contact with. George and Kathy Lutz moved into a house and claimed to experience paranormal activity. A year prior, the house had been the site of a horrible crime, with 23-year-old Ronnie Defoe going from room to room and shooting his 6 family members in cold blood. At his trial, he claimed that voices he had heard on the night of the crime had told him to do it and had controlled his body. But this was not believed, and he was sentenced to 6 life sentences. The Lutz family moved in and reportedly would experience phenomena like unexplained gelatinous drops appearing on their carpet, witnessing each other suddenly appearing to have aged 90 years, doors slamming by themselves, levitating, and waking up every night at 3:15 a.m., the time the murders took place. The family fled soon after and invited reporters and psychic researchers to study the house. The Warrens, of course, showed up, with Lorraine claiming the house was possessed by demons and using the opportunity to get her and Ed on TV, cementing their reputations as paranormal experts, despite not showing any evidence of their findings. The Lutzes published a book about their experiences that was made into a successful movie series called The Amityville Horror, but years later, they would admit that much of the book was highly exaggerated, with much of the content being the result of a creative brainstorming session and 4 bottles of wine. So, much of the activity that the Warrens were validating with their investigation never occurred. But what about the killer saying he had been controlled and forced to shoot his family? Well, years later he admitted that had just been a lie, designed to get him off with an insanity plea. The majority of the lying in this case was by people other than the Warrens, so maybe they were just taken along for the ride. But there are still plenty of examples of them being suspicious to downright hucksters.
Number 3 on this list is the Book of Shadows. The name alone, the Book of Shadows, is enough to make someone believe that this text is haunted, but its origins confirm that suspicion even more. Gerald Gardner was a Wiccan living in the 1940s. Now, if you aren't familiar with what a Wiccan is, then it's actually someone who practices the religion of Wicca, which is a modern pagan religion. Gerald Gardner created the Book of Shadows, or was at least the person who brought it to people's attention. He's also known as the father of Wicca and is considered by most to be the one who started this religion. He may not have actually been the one to have written the book though, because he says that he received this ancient text from a secret coven of witches. Owen Davies, an expert on haunted books, says that this book was one of the last of a line of worshippers of an ancient fertility religion, which he and his followers believed had survived centuries of persecution by Christian authorities. This obviously made this text extremely valuable to Gerald, and he used it as a means to gain more of a following for his religion. Inside this book are magical rituals, spells, enchantments, and a variety of instructions for how to perform other sacred summonings. This book is said to be extremely dark in nature and certainly something that you would want to pray before reading. Gerald apparently used many of these spells and rituals through his life as he praised witchcraft. Others who have read this book have reported feeling extremely cold and getting the sensation of being watched. Any book that you apparently receive from a coven of witches has spells on how to worship them, and it's called the Book of Shadows. It certainly can't be any good. Number 2 on this list is the Great Omar. The Great Omar is one of the prettiest and ornate books that you will ever see in your life. Back in the day, book binding, the process of assembling a book and putting it together, was considered by most to be an art form. This book really proves that, having taken 2,500 hours to create and using emeralds, rubies, and sapphires in its creation, it really was a marvel. The text in this book contained a bunch of 4-line poems by Omar Khayyam. These poems were apparently filled with temptation and condemned by the church because of that. That being said though, after the book was constructed, Sangorsky, the man who designed the book, wanted to sell it at an exorbitant price. Problem was, not many people wanted a book that would cost them thousands of pounds. This book traveled by ship back and forth from Europe and America several times with no apparent buyer in sight. This continued until it's made its way onto a very famous ship called the Titanic. Obviously, the Titanic did not reach its destination, and the Great Omar sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, where it rests to this day. However, what gives this book the designation of being haunted is that only a week or two later, Sangorsky himself died. He died from drowning, just like the people on the Titanic would have died. Ever since this has happened, people believe that the Great Omar was actually cursed, and that it could have potentially been the cause of the Titanic's demise and the death of Sangorsky. It could all be one big coincidence, but I don't recommend reading the Great Omar 2, which was published by Sangorsky's partner later in life, because some evil may just befall you. Number 1 on this list is the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a book that came after one of the oldest grimoires to ever exist, which is the Key of Solomon. Now, the Key of Solomon was estimated to have been written in the 15th century, whereas the book that we're looking at right now, the Lesser Key of Solomon, was said to have been written 2 centuries later. The first book talks a lot about the power of God and utilizing that power for personal gain. Typically, this was done through extensive worship of God and various ceremonies that praised his power. The Lesser Key of Solomon, though, takes a far different approach. This book expanded on those principles, but mainly dove into demonology. Its pages studied the hierarchy of demons and the beliefs surrounding demons. As many of you are probably expecting though, it didn't just stop there at an intellectual study. The Lesser Key of Solomon went far deeper and described the process in summoning demons and traveling to the demon world. Its pages show a much greater appreciation to Satan and discuss the great power that can be obtained from worshipping demons and the devil. It goes into detail on how to craft potions that you can give to other people that will then put them under your spell. This book is also said to be heavily cursed. It is reported that if you own this book, you are susceptible to demonic possession. Previous owners have reported strange ongoings, such as pages turning on their own, other books flying off of the shelf, and dark creatures appearing in their home. Therefore, owning this book is said to be extremely risky, and even though you might get a glimpse into how to navigate the underworld, you could become a victim to one of those very demons that you're trying to summon.